Behold, the sum of our work on fixing Disney's The Rise of Skywalker. On December the 23rd, 2022, we started the long journey of demousing J.J. Abrams' 142-minute disaster piece.
We have arrived, and it is now that we perform our charge.
We sought to make it a good and proper Star Wars movie, a line you will have heard a few times by now. We are doing our best to make it a good and proper Star Wars movie. This was not an empty platitude, it was a statement of intent, not just for each part in the series, but for the compilation we have been working towards since day zero.
That's too much distillation, guys. What, are you crazy? You think the world's ready for this?
This compilation serves as the current definitive version of our work on the Starwarsification of The Rise of Skywalker. The attentive in our audience will find that there have been many changes, some big, some small, but all essential. We have gone through all of our existing work and brought it up to the same standard as our newest work. The vast majority of parts 1 through 4 have been completely recreated. We have added over 60 minutes of new material. We strongly suggest watching the whole video, even if you have been part of our audience since day zero. You could call this video the Death Star briefing stage in our multi-pronged attack on The Rise of Skywalker. While we do suggest some specific repairs, the main point is finding and analyzing the writing equivalent of thermal exhaust ports. How did Disney go wrong? What does established lore tell us? What are some of the potential fixes? This information is essential for the next stage of this project, our proposed rewrite of the entire movie. We have given ourselves some constraints, however. We want to use as much of the original movie's content as possible. We want to preserve as many of the characters and story beats as possible, because our main contention with Disney is that they made no effort to adhere to established lore.
I don't know if they've seen Return of the Jedi.
We don't want to make that same mistake with their reboot universe. 3.5 hours of repairs later, we have completed Stage 1. The ideal solution would have been a galactic exterminatus.
I declare exterminatus.
To set fire to the entire sequel trilogy. Alas, we don't live in a world of ideal solutions. We live in a world where the least qualified hold the reins. It is tempting to throw up our hands and call the whole movie a wash, but if we did that, we wouldn't be any better than the mouse and their minions. We're looking at you, Roundhead.
I know there are Star Wars fans who somehow think that Star Wars was a serious thing, like the Batman movies or something. Justice for Akbar.
It was in this spirit that we resolved to try and salvage what we were given.
With some fortune, they may foster this hatred into purpose.
To show Disney a level of care and due diligence that they have not shown us, that they aren't ever going to show us. It's likely we will revisit this project as our skills improve. Right now, it is a fine balance between sacrificing tauntauns to the algorithm gods, and the high quality of output we strive for. If you do enjoy our work, like, comment and subscribe. It makes a big difference to how our videos perform. Now, let's discuss how this is going to work. You are going to need to be at least vaguely familiar with the plot of The Rise of Skywalker. I'm sorry, but there's no way around it. We'll proceed through the movie chronologically, discussing broken elements in the scenes in which they are the most prominent.
Let's take a look at what really happened.
Black and white video indicates where we are in the film as we proceed through it. Colored video indicates that we are discussing something in greater detail. We will proceed through the movie chronologically, discussing broken elements in the scenes in which they are most prominent. Excellent, let's get into it, shall we? ED1TA, roll the film.
Don't worry, R2, we're going. The dead speak. We could stop here and take this opening crawl apart for the next hour, but this text was hastily written at the last minute. It offers no real insight into the galaxy, and does little for the movie either. Let's move forward to the first actual scene of the movie. Why are there dead trees? I had no idea what was going on until weeks after walking out of the movie. Later, I heard this sequence is supposed to be on Mustafar. We've already seen what that planet is like. Once again though, if you think about it, that makes no sense. These trees would have to grow in the past. Maybe the planet is so hot that a forest of mature trees can be killed by the heat. Saplings would be even more vulnerable, so how did they grow in the first place? Clearly they all died at the same time, while the trees are the same age. Yet whatever happened, nothing was hot enough for the wood to burst into flames. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on. To the reference material. A book from 2009 says that Mustafar is racked by tidal forces, like Io. It specifies that the planet exports ore, extracted from rivers of lava. The imports are food, water, and machinery. That makes sense. The book also says that all surface life died. Of course the ecosystem and food web will be devastated, or even wiped out. It also states that this happened in 3996 BBY. It makes no sense for these trees to be 4,000 years old. To have been dead for all that time is absurd. Yet they can't be as young as they appear either, or why would the trees die? The only way to explain it is by invoking JJ and friends. Someone looked up Earth volcanoes and found that Earth forests have been killed by them. Then, without giving it a moment's thought, lazily dropped that feature onto another world. Absolutely zero attention paid to the history of this planet, or what would and wouldn't be there. Someone thought putting Earth phenomena in the Star Wars universe made him look terribly clever. Instead, it proved the exact opposite. Surface level imagery, not a drop of care and effort beyond that. As for me, I know this book is unreliable. Right next to the Mustafar entry, there's one on Mon Calamari. What could be wrong with that? Well, we already know things about the Mon Cal and their world. For example, that there are two races here, the Mon Calamari and the Quarren. We know the Mon Cal prefer to live on the surface, both the rare land and in floating cities. We know the Quarren are more subnautical and live below the surface of those floating cities. We know both species can breathe air and water, and that they sometimes find it uncomfortable to switch to the aquatic mode. Accordingly, there is an organic gill symbiote, a benign facehugger. Both kinds of natives can use these, and tourists can find them invaluable. The facehugger only lives for a week, so it's perfect for a visit. It is stated that using a gill symbiote is less cumbersome than air tanks. That might be technically correct, but it really doesn't line up with what else we know. We've seen existing examples of air tanks, and they really aren't all that unwieldy. The first is a Roma 6 mask, as worn by the Falcon crew. These are made by Gandorthral Atmospherics and are very capable. The main body is smaller than two of Leia's fists, very compact. The internal air tank lasts 10 minutes and can be connected to larger back-mounted tanks. Best of all, the small internal tank can be replenished by processing surrounding gases. They can dilute or compress an atmosphere of the wrong density. They can heat or cool the air, so you might wear one when it's not strictly required. I hear Hoth gets a bit chilly this time of year. Naturally, the Roma 6 can be adjusted for a variety of non-human requirements. However, this device is better as a filter than a scuba tank. It excels at filtering an atmosphere, and it can run in that mode for an hour. Then you need to install replacement filters, a trivial task. You can definitely hold your breath long enough to swap the filters out. What can't the Gandorthral Atmospherics Roma 6 breath mask do? Vacuum. You need a spacesuit to supply pressure, and that's not what this is. Quite by coincidence, the one thing it can't do is the only time we see it used. The Falcon never passes any barrier that might be able to contain air pressure. Using these inside a space slug is a total mistake. It's just not correct. I don't remember the Empire Strikes Back novelization making any attempt to explain it, but it's been a while since I had my hands on those books. The real reason is that making spacesuit costumes is hard to do convincingly. If they're only going to be used in one scene, it makes sense not to bother. Star Wars isn't the only sci-fi universe that has made this mistake.
I knew Cerberus would screw me again. I'm gonna crush his head.
In Mass Effect 2, one mission involves taking a topless woman into an airless environment.
You get what you get. Deserve's got nothing to do with it.
Well, it does for me. I don't know how you played it. The game realizes this can't work, so it gives her a face mask. No shirt, no helmet, nothing.
Shepard, it was not a malfunction. This was a trap.
Hang on a minute. I was talking about Mustafar, and now we're in a space slug. Let's resolve this tangent by hopping over to Naboo instead. This adds an interesting wrinkle. First of all, the Federation tries to gas Obi-Wan. The other Federation, that is. And I suppose they succeed. They were just expecting the lethal gas to be fatal. Understandable, but a mistake. This scene is an exemplary use case for the Roma 6. We know the gas isn't corrosive, or so toxic it gets in through the skin and eyeballs. Holding your breath is enough to be safe, so the breath mask would also work. We're not here for that scene in orbit though. Down on the planet, we see a completely different apparatus. For this mission, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan carry the A-99 Aquator breather. This allows them to dive to the bottom of a lake to the Gungan capital city. It seems reasonable to assume Ota Gunga is one of the deeper cities, surely hundreds of meters. The city is meant to be hidden after all. Sunlight can only reach about 200 meters down, and the Jedi seem to swim from blue to black water. While we're down here, let's dismiss the idea of going through the planet core. This is, of course, utter nonsense. Sorry, Daddy Big Boss Nass, Your Honor, but it's not correct. Boss Nass isn't entirely fluent in Basic. He doesn't know what he's saying. Obviously, the tunnels only go through the crust of the planet. The questionable book takes Nass's word at face value. The planet is a world of peculiar geology. It lacks a molten core, instead possessing a honeycombed interior surging with luminous low-cap plasma. Wide, shallow seas and swamps separate plains of grass and scattered points of elevation. Not only is this nonsensical, it's also completely unnecessary for anything in the movie. Getting from the Gungan city to Theed Palace works fine without going through the core of the planet. All you need is a network of tunnels through the crust to escape a landlocked lake. The plasma is used in Gungan weapons, but again has no need of a planet core. There is no reason to say it lacks a molten core. All you get from that is that a guy with a thick accent used exactly the right word. Better to assume he was using figurative terms.
They think their brains so big.
Right, back to the Jedi equipment. The A-99 breather actually comes in two forms. The original TPM Visual Dictionary showed one variant, and the expanded book shows another. The one from the movie is riddled with holes, the other is smooth. Both are listed as compressed air tanks with capacity for 2 hours. The Roma 6 has remarkably good capacity. The A-99 has absurd capacity. But I've come up with a way to harmonize these two props. Let's say the A-99 is more specialized than the Roma 6. It has been designed to work in water and nothing else. The difference between the two pictures is a set of covers. Remove those covers from the grey one, and it becomes the brown and white one seen in the movie. Then, instead of storing 2 scuba tanks in the palm of your hand, it's a mechanical gill. The perforated white cylinder is a water intake, to be processed into oxygen on the fly. Then there's no capacity inconsistency. If the A-99 just held hours of air, how could air tanks be cumbersome? The Aquator breather is a fraction of the size of the organic gill or filter unit. Speaking of the organic gill, the Mon Calamari was supposed to have been the example. The questionable 2009 book describes the history as having first contact with the Republic. This is the same time frame as the Mustafar date, 4166 BBY. This is compatible with the prequels, where Quarren are shown in the Republic Senate in Episode 1.
I will not defer. I've come before you to resolve this attack on our sovereignty now. I was not elected to watch my...
The Mon Cal appear in Episode 3, or at least that's what I'm informed they are. It's a bit hard to make out the details. But these appearances are mistakes. We already know about the history of the Mon Calamari. We know about the man named Akbar, later a rebel admiral. I'll give you a moment to repeat his most iconic line, just to get it out of your system. Ready?
Admiral, we have enemy ships in Sector 27!
Our cruisers can't repel firepower of that magnitude.
We know that the Mon Cal joined the Alliance to restore the Republic less than 2 years BBY. We know that the Mon Cal developed space travel to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and make friends with new civilizations, to boldly go where no fishman or squid thingy had gone before. It had been hard to develop that tech, since the Mon Cal had difficulties mining ore. With most of the world underwater, even the amphibians had trouble reaching the planet's crust. In contrast, the Quarren prefer to live on the sea floor. By befriending the Quarren, a new age of technological development began. Orbital infrastructure was created. Spaceports, shipyards, all the supporting facilities. More than most, the Mon Cal saw the stars as islands in the galactic sea. The planet of Mon Calamari is on the outer rim of the galaxy far, far away. It had made contact with its neighbors, and a few rogue traders were also aware of the location. But eventually they made first contact with the galactic community, the pan-galactic government, and it wasn't the Old Republic. Fitting our Trek Federation-like characterization of them, the Mon-Cal came in peace. They broadcast messages of friendship and free trade. This would probably have worked if the history of the galaxy had unfolded the way the new book described. Instead, they crossed paths with the Empire. They were interested in trade, all right. The Imperial forces were very pleased with Mon-Cal technology and decided to take it for themselves. The Mon-Cal were seen as gentle, and therefore stupid, a natural slave species. The Empire launched an invasion, and the Mon-Calamari protested. The Emperor ordered the destruction of 3 floating cities, to make an example of them, demonstrating the price of insubordination. Unexpectedly, the plan backfired. A peaceful race with no history of war wiped out the initial invasion force. They started creating battleships, weapons. Akbar had been the leader of Coral City. Now, he was one of the first enslaved by the Empire. He had been taken as an interpreter and personal servant for an officer. Before long, Akbar was a gift to Grand Moff Tarkin, the overlord of the Outer Rim.
Vader, release him.
As you wish.
Akbar played along, secretly studying the Empire. This is how he learned of a rebellion against the Empire, target of Tarkin's ire. When Tarkin was en route to the completed Death Star, rebels attacked his ship.
I think you overestimate their chances.
After they escaped with Akbar, he returned to his people to convince the Mon-Cal to join the Rebel Alliance. For this, he was given the rank of Commander Akbar. His promotion to Admiral Akbar would happen soon afterwards, when he returned with a new kind of starfighter. But the origin of the B-Wing is a story for another video.
Gray Leader standing by.
May the Force be with us.
For now, we've established the 2009 book can't be right. We already knew the history of the Mon Calamari in 1995, but even in the corrupted, rewritten reboot timeline, the Disney movie is not correct. You can't just slap a dead forest onto the volcano planet because you like the visuals. The hazards of using a name. No explanation is given in the movie itself, which is typical. It could be a new dead forest planet, except for one thing. To explain the next item, Mustafar makes the most sense. It still doesn't explain why there are humans wearing funny hats. The natives of Mustafar are not human. In the original lore, Darth Vader had a castle on the planet Vajun. In the reboot, I'm told this was moved to Mustafar. Seems a bit of an odd choice. You'd think he would avoid the volcano world. Maybe he used to come here in order to provoke some strong feelings. Then he uses those feelings for dark side things. JJ doesn't show any castle, just a box in the middle of nowhere. J.J. Abrams calls this Black Pyramid a Sith Wayfinder. In his movie, it is a magical compass that allows its owner to sail past the treacherous reefs and storms surrounding a hidden island. If the compass is destroyed, you're locked out of the island. However, it accidentally looks like something from Star Wars. These are Jedi holocrons, the Force user's equivalent of an external hard drive. These polyhedra of gold and silver and crystal are used to store information, such as the sacred Jedi texts. In contrast, this is a Sith holocron. Notice how its appearance is a black tetrahedral pyramid, like JJ's compass. But the holocron is much deeper. It's more like the One Ring of Sauron. It's a corruptive artifact. It wants to be found, to be used, to draw people in and tempt them with voiceless promises of power. The Sith holocron is the most mysterious of all boxes. It's almost a character of its own, and all it does is sit there radiating malice. Keep that in mind, and watch this clip from the movie JJ made.
The only way you're getting to Exegol is with me.
See how much more meaningful it is to destroy a Sith holocron instead of a Sith Wayfinder. JJ's box represents a house key, and destroying it means getting out your spare key, that's all. The holocron from Star Wars is more like a dark library full of 1,000 different Necronomicons. To destroy the holocron means giving up all that dark side knowledge and power. It's the ultimate proof of resolve, when the evil character turns good. Despite all the temptation, the whispers in his mind of, why shouldn't I keep it? He crushes the Black Pyramid. Just by knowing about one single item from the Star Wars galaxy, we can replace JJ's invention with the Sith holocron and vastly improve the movie. Swapping in the holocron is perhaps the most important change. Without Snoke to be a mentor, the holocron can finish Kylo's training. It can also show how deep the dark side goes. Perhaps there's more in there than Kylo was ready for. There is a part here where we meet the reborn Emperor. We shall ignore this entirely. Its issues are best addressed later on, when his plans are revealed. For now, we go back to see what the good guys are doing. Kind of like how episode 5 and 6 start with the bad guys actually. I wonder if that's a coincidence. The heroes need to transfer some data from an alien informant. A cable is run between the informant's computer and R2-D2, who is aboard the Falcon. There are several things to like about this scene. It reminds me of mid-air refueling, which is perhaps the most interesting thing you can do in flight. Also, let's appreciate the prop they used. Look at the girth, imagine how well shielded the wiring is. This is great, it's exactly the sort of thing one could easily miss imagining. The wires used in Star Wars are not, and will never have been, something you can buy on Earth. It'd look and feel wrong if they matched the wires going to your Earth modem. However, even with how much I love the main prop used in this scene, it's hilarious. Look at what JJ does with this, and compare it to actual Star Wars. There are some horizontal stripes on R2, and JJ decides they are dust covers for the macro USB ports. You may remember that R2 is connected to several things. Here is the most important one. Sharing the Death Star plans with the Rebellion. Another nice cable, plugged into somewhere on the right of R2's torso. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be anything in that location. All we can see is a large vertical panel, with no indication of what's behind it. This is not what JJ used. There are also two tools R2 uses for computer interfaces. These only work on a fixed wall socket. I can't imagine a cable adapter working. Would the spinny bit need to spin on the far end of the wire too? This one fits a power outlet. Perfectly reasonable. Earth guitar jacks aren't far off the size of some mains power pins. We can clearly see where these two extend from. This also lines up with the documentation. It has a long compartment on the right listed as the computer interface arms. Luke attaches some equipment to a small panel in the center right.
See now. There you go.
Obviously, a gonk droid would be better to power equipment, but they're heavy. Power droids have thicker armor than most battle droids, and a few ships. Most power droids are either the EG-6 or Industrial Automaton's GNK. They're designed to be extremely safe. These coolant vents are working as intended. With one of these, you have a fusion-powered traction engine. As long as you're not running industrial or military equipment, a gonk droid will cover it all.
Stay and watch after the camp.
But you all know the advertising campaign for the revolutionary new series of R2 units. No job is over this little guy's head. It's funny because they're short. You know, sometimes I amuse even myself.
That doesn't sound too hard.
There's a circular saw down in the center left panel. Not relevant except to eliminate the hatch. There's a shock probe opposite in the same place Luke connected a power lead. Effective against Ewoks, Salacious Crumb, and chains for some reason. Another zapper here under one of the top panels, used against a droid outside the astromech socket. Again, no relevance.
Now, where are you taking me?
Next, let's move on to manipulator arms. We know there's one here in the head, used during the trench run. One here from the vertical slot on the far left of the torso, used against Yoda.
R2, let him have it.
That seems to be a heavy-duty arm. Another one up the central hatch, as seen serving drinks aboard the sail barge. Hang on, I've just remembered something. We've seen R2 use an arm to operate something a long time ago in a Corellian corvette.
Hey, you're not permitted in there. It's restricted. You'll be deactivated for sure.
This is the arm used to open the escape pod. But look at it. That's not a very good arm, is it? I choose to believe that these are the covers for a pair of arms, not the arms themselves. Though it would make sense to have the covers function as an extra pair of rudimentary arms. These are the main arms used when in a starfighter's astromech socket. Either way, we know this isn't where you'd find an astromech's serial ports.
You can't. How would you know the hyperdrive is deactivated?
I've already shown options for data input, but there's one more thing. At the end of the recorded message, Leia inserts the plans into R2.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
The way to do this would be to reference that pivotal scene. Take a close look at the radar eye. See the slot underneath it? Well, that's where the Death Star plans were inserted. We don't see much of the storage medium that held the Death Star plans. We do know the Empire called them data tapes, but it's hard to imagine a tape cassette fitting in that slot. Clearly, they've also dropped support for compact flash. No, this slot is for data cards. Come to think of it, does Leia's data card predate Earth's memory cards? Star Trek gets a lot of credit for predicting cell phones in the communicator and tricorder. Convenient data storage has been part of Star Wars since the first minutes. You might think that is a minor point, dare I say it, a nitpick. Whether you put up with nits is your business. Notice the difference in effort. The prequel R2 was made to be fully consistent, with all the movies and with the reference books. The reboot isn't consistent with any of them, nor do I expect this mistake will stay consistent within the reboot universe. Speaking of consistency, here's some infighting.
The Senate is full of greedy, squabbling delegates.
Some ties arrive and JJ decides it is time to escape, but he's out of smoke grenades. Not to worry, JJ can invent his way out of any problem. The magical mystery hyperdrive can just take us away. Right, it is time. To explain JJ, I must invoke RJ. In Disney Wars 9, there are several references. These only make sense in the context of Disney Wars 8. That movie, The Last Jedi, is famously controversial. Of the Disney trilogy, the middle movie was helmed by another bloke. He has many names, and the majority are impolite. Perhaps the least offensive is Roundhead, and in some circles his name is a curse. When something has been defiled and disrespected, we say it has been Johnsoned.
Hello, I'm Ryan Johnson, and he's looking right into the camera lens. Right here. Look at those eyes. Never do this if you're in a movie.
We dare not utter its true name. Henceforth, the demon shall be known only by the initials RJ. I had planned to completely skip covering TLJ in this series, to ignore it entirely, fixing only 7 and 9, the ones captained by a Mr. J.J. Abrams. However, JJ's hand was forced by the entity known as RJ.
The Jedi's weapon deserves more respect.
At face value, this saber-catching scene should have its own criticisms, but this scene only exists to undo this TLJ one. It doesn't have a purpose of its own. This here is a very strange and unsatisfactory thing to say.
We need to put some holdo maneuvers, do some real damage.
Come on, that move is 1 in a million.
Par for the course with JJ, but he didn't have a lot to work with. This is a terrible explanation, and what JJ struggles to explain is equally terrible.
And that your anger with Solo must be equally powerful.
The Holdo maneuver is not a neat trick like the Picard maneuver. Holdo is the name of someone else's Death Star shotgun. RJ did this. Kabloom. People tell me it looks pretty, but I just don't see it. Since I don't want to talk about this movie yet, we'll keep it abstract. To holdo is to try ramming something while firing up the hyperdrive. I didn't want to explain what's wrong with this yet. It's not time. All you need to know is that it isn't how hyperspace works, at all. No wiggle room, no 1 in a million chance. This cannot happen in Star Wars. It's time to tell you all about the Shadows. No, not Cliff Richard Jr.'s band. Jakar, get that book out of here.
The Book of Jakar. Read it, we'll talk afterward.
I don't read Narn.
Learn!
There's hyperspace, and then there's real space. They aren't completely isolated from each other. Hyperspace is full of shadows, mass shadows. A star casts a mass shadow into hyperspace, meaning you can't fly into that area. What happens if you jump to light speed on a bad course? Well, nothing. Most likely whatever you hit won't even be able to tell. The ship in hyperspace, though, that just ceases to exist. Which means RJ's spiffing wheeze is already right out. My barrel of lore is nowhere near empty, so let's keep going. Another feature of hyperspace comes from Empire Strikes Back. Vader demands to know where the Falcon has gone, from last known trajectory.
Alert all commands. Calculate every possible destination along the last known trajectory.
Darth Vader is nobody's fool. If Han could escape by just steering a little to the left, Vader's plan wouldn't work. In hyperspace, your course is fixed. That's why the Never computer needs to calculate before jumping.
Traveling through hyperspacing like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it ended your trip real quick, wouldn't we?
If you could dodge supernova mass shadows as you come to them, you wouldn't need to pre-calculate. The interesting part is how JJ responds.
Lisa, think of something. Hands up.
Left to make a sequel after something impossible happens, JJ gives up.
I give up. I give up.
Throws up his hands in despair and accepts that the universe has been broken. Then he tries to make the best of the broken world. JJ reckons that this gives him the ability to get away with literally anything.
Don't do that again.
While TLJ draws the fire, nobody cares that JJ has done worse. Trying to top the Holdo fiasco, JJ comes up with what he calls lightspeed skimming.
What are you doing? Lightspeed skipping!
This isn't like the 40k lore about the Tau hyperdrive, where Tau have to make slow, shallow jumps through the warp because they aren't psychic. JJ just wanted to flash up a sequence of cool environments in the first few minutes, to capture the audience's attention. JJ declares that if you wiggle the hyperdrive controls, you can pop in and out of hyperspace rapidly. What's wrong with this one? It isn't how hyperspace works. There is no element of chance. This cannot happen in Star Wars either. First of all, even if it was possible, you wouldn't try it in the Millennium Falcon. The fastest hyperdrive in the galaxy is the Falcon's. In hyperspace, it has the unique ability to outrun any ship. The famously cool SR-71 missile countermeasure of "just go faster" applies. 0.5 past lightspeed means literally nobody else in the galaxy can possibly keep up. The trade-off is that the Falcon's hyperdrive is brittle. It takes constant maintenance and is prone to breaking down. It's like having Thrust 2 disguised as a station wagon. Are we supposed to believe you can flick the engines on and off willy-nilly? The hyperdrive has a few moments of warning while the calculations are made, then operates steadily for hours at a time. You wouldn't treat a light bulb like this, then pretend to be surprised when the bulb blows. Rapid cycling is a rough treatment for most machinery. So, if the Falcon was real, it wouldn't stand up to this kind of abuse. There's an intricate hyperdrive on the end of those levers. It isn't magically tied to the control's position. But this is the debatable part. One could argue against the maintenance constraints. The part that was Johnsoned isn't so forgiving. Remember the Eclipse, the enormous Star Destroyer? It's time to introduce an older relative, the Immobilizer 418. This one is tiny for a Star Destroyer. Even the small Victory class are half as long again. More commonly known as the Interdictor, they are only 600 meters long and extremely specialized. You wouldn't find an interdictor in atmosphere. That would defeat the purpose of the ship. These bulbous protrusions are the whole reason the ship exists. The Eclipse happened to have gravity well generators in addition to the super laser. Interdictors are built around a grav well array. Their role is as a mobile hyperspace inhibitor. When the grav wells are running, all nearby ships are blocked from making a jump to lightspeed.
Let's get out of here. Ready for lightspeed? 1, 2, 3!
More concerning, an interdictor can even pull ships out of hyperspace. Within its area of effect, the hyperdrive cannot possibly prevent you from dropping into real space. Be they natural or artificial, a gravity well completely counters an attempt to use hyperdrives.
No light speed. It's not my fault.
You've probably already figured out the issue for JJ. He wants a pretty vista, so he shows jumping in and out just above planetary surfaces. This is laughably wrong. It isn't risky, it's flat out impossible within Star Wars. The only excuse JJ has is, "But Mum, RJ broke the hyperdrive law first."
But I
was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Who's the more foolish, the RJ or the JJ who follows him?
Locked on target.
This scene is absolutely brimming over with the wrong ability. There's one other huge mistake. What's the excuse for breaking the law? Well, our heroes are being chased by TIE fighters. That's fine. I'd go so far as to say it's a good idea. We know all about TIE fighters, what they can and can't do. A chase through hyperspace is a perfect example of something TIEs can't do. The TIE gets its name from the twin ion engine drive system. A marvel of Imperial engineering, few ships can rival the TIE. A TIE fighter is agile and extremely fast. Only the A-Wing interceptors can outrun a bog-standard TIE of the line. A lot was sacrificed in the trade-off for extreme speed. TIEs are short-range fighters. You can't fly one across the galaxy.
No, it's a short-range fighter.
The absolute limit for onboard supplies is 2 days, or a few hours of combat.
A fighter that size couldn't get this deep into space on its own.
Look at him, he's heading for that small moon.
Partly, this is because TIEs sacrifice life support, of all things.
Yes, sir.
A TIE pilot wears a sealed spacesuit, otherwise he'd be dead instantly from the unpressurized cockpit. The other huge sacrifice? Well, TIEs do not have a hyperdrive or shields. Only the TIE Advanced X1, as used by Vader, had a hyperdrive. One could argue that JJ has shown a new model of TIE, that the First Order abandoned the TIE design philosophy, turning it into a copy of the X-Wing. All the advantages of a TIE discarded to make a heavier, slower, mediocre starfighter.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me!
That would be incorrect, though. The real reason is that JJ never knew anything about TIE fighters. They make a cool noise, they're used by the Empire, and JJ's knowledge stops at that. It was never JJ's intention to depict a new type of TIE. He didn't mean to add life support and hyperdrives to them. He never knew the first thing about TIEs.
It's very complicated.
One of the most prominent ships in the saga, and JJ couldn't be bothered to look up a single characteristic. If anyone in the film crew pointed out what was wrong, they were completely ignored. These kind of accidental changes are typical of Disney Wars.
Representative Binks, I know I can count on you.
Misa, I need to be taking on this heavy burden. Misa, accept this with more humility.
To be fair, X-Wings are good starfighters. In the Star Wars universe, the Empire did indeed try their own take on an Alliance-style starfighter, the TIE Defender. It was designed to retain the speed and agility that make the TIE series so remarkable. Contrast this with the TIE Interceptor, designed to be a better example of the normal TIE principles.
Got it.
The Interceptor is more agile than an X-Wing and nearly as fast as an A-Wing. The Defender is superior to the Interceptor on both counts. Of course, they still don't have life support, and only the Defender has a hyperdrive. Because of the sheer cost of building one, the Defender never made it past the prototype phase. Now, let's fix JJ's mess. He wants rapid-fire scenes of rebel ships being chased by Imperial forces. This light-speed skimming is not an option, but that's fine because we have a relevant film technique. To use it, we need there to be more than one spaceship in the entire galaxy. It is my official judgment as a Star Wars expert that there are several ships in the galaxy. Choice.
He agrees!
To show the spectacular vistas, we call upon the montage. Instead of dropping the Falcon into a new world every few seconds, use film techniques. A montage is several short scenes in rapid succession, which is exactly JJ's goal. The only change needed is to show a different ship each time. This ice planet can be the Falcon, this other one can be the Tantive IV, the next to be a couple of X-Wings, etc. This has two main advantages. First, it isn't impossible. Can't emphasize enough how important that is. Second, it makes the galaxy look bigger. Remember how in Empire Strikes Back, the Falcon goes one way and Luke goes another? There are countless people having their own adventures, all the time. JJ wants to show several places quickly. That's fine. There are very few constraints upon you. You can use the power of the montage to show the same ship in different places. To show them rapidly, you can skip the travel time getting from one to another. Alternatively, you can show different ships and people at the same time. By skipping from place to place, you aren't forced to increment the calendar. The one thing you cannot do is to have it all happen in real time. It isn't possible for a ship to go from one planet to another in seconds. It takes a lot of effort to get it this wrong, this thoroughly. You have to deliberately ignore a lot of warning signs, a lot of canon. To be in the Star Wars setting is to write inside certain lines. If it fits with everything we already know, that story is possible. When you have differences like these, that can only be a different universe. JJ has not finished reintroducing his characters. Prime among his champions is the exalted Rey, a mighty warrior with 1,000 skills. Her triumph is inevitable. Nobody is surprised to find she keeps using the same limbs all trilogy. Where others are injured, blast doors are weaker than Rey's skin. No harm may befall her. It is time to deal with the Rey training sequence. This is a very odd choice. In the final movie of the reboot trilogy, after 3 whole hours, Rey begins her training. Let's compare Rey to the Skywalkers. Both of the Skywalkers were too old to begin the Jedi training process.
No, he will not be trained.
No.
He is too old.
Yes, too old to begin the training.
Luke doesn't even appear in the movie until 17 minutes in. Luke is offered Jedi training after 35 minutes.
You must learn the ways of the Force.
And begins training before 57 minutes. Luke passively uses the Force in a plot-critical way at the end, after 1 hour 54 minutes. Luke actively uses the Force for the first time at 2 hours 11 minutes. By 2 hours 15 minutes, Luke is instructed to seek further training.
There you will learn from Yoda.
After 3 hours 2 minutes, Luke starts his second wave of training under a different master. He wins an imaginary lightsaber duel at 3 hours 6 minutes. Luke can barely levitate a stone at 3 hours 10 minutes. At 3 hours 50 minutes, Luke loses his first saber duel.
There is no escape.
Luke attempts a Jedi mind trick for the first time at 4 hours 30 minutes.
You will take me to Jabba now.
At 4 hours 48 minutes, Luke is still looking for more training.
I've come back to complete the training.
He is surprised to hear that he doesn't require more training, and that he is not a Jedi yet.
Not yet. One thing remains.
6 hours into the trilogy, Luke gains the upper hand in a saber duel for the first time. After 6 hours of movies, Luke has trained at every opportunity and has completed that training. This is what it means for someone to become a Jedi.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Now let's see how Anakin was handled. Anakin first appears 32 minutes into his trilogy, a little later. Shortly after, at 41 minutes, he boasts of his reflexes.
I'm the only human who can do it.
Anakin has been unconsciously using his Force sensitivity to be a better pilot.
He can see things before they happen. That's why he appears to have such quick reflexes.
We already knew Anakin had to be the best star pilot in the galaxy since the first movie.
He was the best star pilot in the galaxy.
For the entire rest of the movie, Anakin never actively uses the Force. Anakin is not trained, but he is given the opportunity to watch a Jedi Master.
I'm not allowed to train you, so I want you to watch me and be mindful.
After 2 hours, Anakin is no longer forbidden from training.
Your apprentice, Skywalker, will be.
At 2 hours 30 minutes, Anakin is warned that his passive Force senses are still not attuned.
Besides, your senses aren't that attuned, my young apprentice.
10 years of training have gone by to reach this point.
I haven't seen her in 10 years, Master.
By 2 hours 45 minutes, Anakin levitates an object for the first time on screen.
As wise as Master Yoda and as powerful as Master Windu.
After 4 hours 24 minutes, Anakin loses his first lightsaber duel. Only after 4 hours 52 minutes does Anakin win a saber duel. At 5 hours 15 minutes, Anakin has all but completed his training.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of Master.
He is surprised to hear that he is not a Jedi Master yet.
What?
Finally, at 6 hours 38 minutes, Anakin sees himself lose one final duel with his own eyes. With that background knowledge in place, we can evaluate the character of Ray Disney. For the utmost fairness possible, I use the same timing method for all 3 sets of movies. Ray appears earlier than the Skywalkers, a mere 10 minutes into the movie. That's good. This means there's slightly more time for her to train. Let's see what they do with the time given to them. At 53 minutes, Ray hears about the Force for the first time.
Thought it was a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. A magical power holding together good and evil, the dark side and the light.
From first appearance on screen, Luke took 18 minutes to hear about the Jedi, the Force, and to be offered training. After 40 minutes of his introduction, Luke began training. Ray has racked up 43 minutes since introduction without knowing Jedi exist. To play Darth's advocate, maybe they're setting Ray up as more like Anakin than Luke. Maybe she'll not be trained or actively use the Force until the second movie. And that could work, and then a time skip of 10 years allows her time to train. At 1 hour 7 minutes, Ray meets a dried apricot. She steals a lightsaber without the knowledge or blessing of its rightful owner.
I shouldn't have gone in there.
More importantly, the brand mascot for the dried fruit company is a potential mentor.
I am no Jedi, but I know the Force.
Even Disney knew they couldn't get away with calling this thing a Jedi, but it's better than nothing. Nothing. There's a perfect description of the knowledge and training Ray has so far. The apricot claims to know something about the Force.
No.
Naturally, Ray instantly rejects the idea of learning anything from a prune.
I don't want any part of this.
Luke didn't reject the training, he just refused to leave his home and family.
I'm not going to Alderaan. I've got to get home. It's late. I'm in port as it is.
He wouldn't abandon the farm to go off on some damn fool idealistic crusade. Ben Kenobi was already committed to leaving the planet, and Luke refused to follow until his uncle was ready to do without him.
Look, I can take you as far as Anchorhead. You can get a transport there to Mos Eisley or wherever you're going.
This puts Ray considerably behind, but it could be salvaged. Time to move on. At 1 hour 30 minutes, Ray uses an old Jedi mind trick.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
This is an active Force technique. It's not some passive enhancement like the piloting skills of Luke and Anakin.
I understand you've become quite a good pilot yourself.
Besides, passive Force usage is already required to explain Ray's own piloting. Not even going to touch that. If we call this active Force use, that puts her 41 minutes faster than Luke, 75 minutes faster than Anakin. Except that's not right, because that would be if Ray had telekinetically opened her restraints. The Jedi mind trick is exactly 3 hours and 2 movies ahead of when a fully trained Luke used one. Okay, now let's look past this absurd timing. This movie makes a distinction between the Jedi and the Force. This is not a Force mind trick, it is specifically tied to the Jedi.
What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that?
Luke witnessed this ability before leaving his homeworld for the first time.
You don't need to see his identifications.
I thought we were dead.
The Force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded.
After training under 2 different Jedi Masters for 2 movies, Luke learns the technique. A Force-sensitive person can learn this ability by inheriting the knowledge and experience of 1,000 generations of Jedi.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic.
Fine then, Ray doesn't know it's possible, had no time to learn, and didn't have access to the only people who knew this technique. Besides all that, what's wrong here? Well, for a wizard to cast this Confundus charm, it doesn't just take arcane knowledge and years of practice. Casting the Jedi mind trick requires a somatic component. Like many others, this Force technique requires a hand gesture, or equivalent appendage. One of the defining features of the somatic component is that if your hands are bound, you can't cast that spell. Remind me of Ray's predicament at the time again? Oh, that's right. She's tied to a bed in a sturdy set of manacles. Whoopsie daisy, an innocent mistake that could have happened to anyone. Anyone who did 0 research on the subject matter anyway. Moving right along, at 1 hour 53 minutes, Ray makes active use of the Force. This one is telekinesis, pulling a lightsaber to her hand. only 18 minutes ahead of when Luke did the same thing, and 52 minutes ahead of Anakin, except that in those cases, it was only lifting against gravity. Rey is doing something fundamentally different here. She is making an opposed roll. A trained Force user of a higher level attempts to move the target object, and she wants to move it somewhere else. Suppose that little Annie tried this against Qui-Gon's apprentice. We know that Anakin has a greater potential in the Force than Obi-Wan, but is completely untrained.
The reading is off the chart. Over 20,000.
Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high.
Who do you think would win a telekinetic tug-of-war? That's right, every single time the winner would be the one who was trained for years.
Obi-Wan is ready.
I am ready to face the trials.
No amount of talent or conviction could hope to overcome knowledge and experience. Well, actually there is one way this scene might work. Yoda tells us that the dark side of the Force is not stronger. He says it is quicker, easier, and more seductive. The only way for a complete novice— wait, not a novice, that implies too much training. For a completely uninitiated layman to win an opposed role for Force use, it must be the dark side. The pathetic scavenger has known nothing but a life ruled by aggression and fear.
But beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force. Easily they flow, quick to join when they fight.
There exists no mentor to instruct her in the Jedi way. Both of the Skywalkers are disciples of the light side, the Jedi. If they gave in to hate, like Rey did, they might have learnt telekinesis more quickly. Except that even this explanation doesn't work. Rey doesn't go up against someone who is committed to staying in the light. Her opponent is someone with years of training in the Jedi way, and who has more experience with the dark side. This doesn't work at all. It's like Rey rolled a 100 on a 6-sided die. That isn't even cheating, like with Watto's loaded chance cube. It's a complete failure to understand what's going on. It's playing hopscotch when the game is badminton. Continuing the comparison, with the stolen saber in hand, she has a fight. It's clear she has never seen a sword fight, but she might have heard about one. Her swordsmanship is slightly more refined than that of a 6-year-old with an imaginary stick. Oddly enough, it only gets worse from here. In this one, she keeps attempting a thrust. It never works, but it's better than the baseball bat form she favors later on. There's an amusing mutual grapple where both parties have enough wrist movement to end it at any time. Again, this could work if she gave in to the dark side, and her opponent had zero training. Aside from the laughable choreography, we're interested in the timing. She wins a saber duel 243 minutes ahead of Luke, and 175 minutes ahead of Anakin. By the way, did I mention this duel is the first time she has ever seen an active lightsaber? Let's look at it another way. Instead of comparing the first duel the Skywalkers win to the first one she wins, what about to their first duels? It's a bit complicated because winning your first saber duel is unprecedented. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have decades of practice at sparring, so they aren't comparable. Rey Disney wins her first saber duel 113 minutes before Luke loses his first one. She wins her first duel 147 minutes before Anakin loses his first one. She has never witnessed a lightsaber fight before, when both Skywalkers had done hours earlier. Now, you could say this is because of the caliber of opposition. Both Skywalkers had to fight a fully trained Lord of the Sith as a mere Jedi apprentice. Rey only duels an edgy teenage dropout, so of course he's completely incompetent. She could probably win if she was completely unarmed, given that he's completely unable to land a single strike. Then she meets Jake.
You don't need Luke Skywalker.
I came to this island to die.
The depressed, cowardly hermit. Rey's refusal to learn is matched by Jake's refusal to teach.
Go away!
She claims that Kyle Ben is strong in the dark side.
We need you to bring the Jedi back because Kylo Ren is strong with the dark side of the Force.
But that's obviously false. If he was anything approaching competent or powerful, she'd already be dead. At 3 hours 6 minutes, Jake Skywalker has a giggle at her expense.
I feel something.
You feel it?
Yes, I feel it. Really?
Wow, it must be really strong
Well,
with
I've
you.
never Ow!
This is the closest she comes to training, and it lines up with Luke continuing his training under Yoda. This is also half an hour slower than Anakin, who had all his training take place off-camera between movies. After 3 hours 16 minutes, she does a little dance while holding a stick. This is to practice her precision of movement, coordination, accuracy, that sort of thing. It's no substitute for, say, a training remote. Good against remotes is one thing, good against an inanimate lump of rock is something else. Rey isn't good at either. Her Mary Sue powers only activate against the living. But if this is equivalent to Luke's first lightsaber training, she is 140 minutes later than him. At 3 hours 36 minutes, she beats up a sad suicidal old man. I don't think there's an equivalent from Star Wars to compare this to. By 4 hours into the reboot trilogy, Rey has a fight against a pack of harmless red dudes. This roughly lines up with Luke's sail barge fight, or Anakin in the Geonosis arena. There was never any real danger, and not just because we know Anakin lives through it. Then, at 4 hours 34 minutes, she effortlessly lifts a tonnage far greater than something Yoda struggled with. This isn't comparable to anything the Skywalkers, or anyone else, do, for obvious reasons. Finally, after 5 hours and 1 minute of footage, Rey begins to train. In terms of timing, this training is 119 minutes behind Luke, and 151 minutes behind Anakin. Yet, in terms of ability, Rey has remained constant, regardless of how much or how little training she gets. Why would she suddenly need training now? Of course, I do understand the reason. The Mouse Company realized that there is no name they can call their detractors that will stop them from noticing things. Declaring Rey is the first female Jedi ever, that won't work anymore. People keep pointing out how that's not true, and how beloved the real Jedi were. Another academic article claiming everyone who doesn't like the reboot is Russian, that's no help at all. Regardless of what they say, their Mary Sue character will still be called what she is. But by the time they realized they needed to step up the damage control, it was too late. The training should have taken place during or before the first movie. Failing that, it should have been both before and during the second movie.
I bypassed the training.
Since none of that happened, the only remaining place to put the training was before the plot of the last movie gets going. This is a perfect example of too little, too late. By the time the evil corporation attempted a course correction, it made things worse.
We need to put some hold-on maneuvers.
You see, the previous movies had established impossible feats as something Rey can do. Suddenly deciding she does need training, like a mortal from the Star Wars universe, is incorrect. You can't put the genie back in the toothpaste tube. She can do things that require training before getting any training. Putting a training scene after the fact helps nothing. Now that we've proven training isn't the answer, what would a competent person have written? That's beside the point, because it wouldn't look anything like the reboot universe. The first thing to fix is a very strange line, right before the training. I'm starting to think it isn't possible to hear the voices of the Jedi who came before.
Starting to think it isn't possible to hear the voices of the Jedi who came before.
Well, of course it isn't. Poe Dameron, this is your 11th warning about this. You mustn't take advantage of Rey's gullibility like that. If you tell her she can hear the voices of all the previous airbenders, she doesn't know that's a joke. She's spent the last 3 days floating, and getting upset when she realizes it isn't possible. This also means we need to remove a funny line from the final boss fight. And I, pant, heavy breathing, gasp, huff and puff, am all the Jedi. I'd never considered leaving that in for a nanosecond anyway, so it's no loss.
And I...
It's me, Mario!
To repair this, we need a spare part. Given that Rey never needs to learn or practice, she must already have access to the knowledge. I've heard she stole the training during the interrogation scene, when the Vader wannabe accidentally probed himself instead of her. This is laughable. You're telling me the badman isn't incompetent, he just downloaded Space Kung Fu into his enemy by mistake.
Combat training.
He can't beat someone with no training, because he instantly trained her up to his own skill level? If that were possible, why wouldn't the Jedi have used it? Grab anyone the least bit force sensitive, install a lifetime of training, throw them into battle. No, that doesn't explain anything. The way to fix this is to turn Rey into a walking McMuffin. Years ago, Jake Skywalker saw the future. He realized that not the Empire would appear, led by not Palpatine. It wouldn't be safe to operate in the open. He would need to hide until the time is right. But any physical location can be searched. If Jake were to, say, write some books on paper, they might get burnt. A Jedi holocron could be discovered and destroyed. He needed to hide the Jedi lore somewhere nobody would look. Jake went to the planet not Tatooine and found a family of nobodies with a young child. A daughter a few years old, are Force sensitive. Jake grasps the little girl by the face and performs a Vulcan mind meld. He installs a Jedi Katra into her mind, then covers his tracks. Young Rey is now a repository of all Jedi knowledge, and she will never find out without help. When the time is right, he will return and use that stored knowledge to set up a new Jedi temple. Rey's parents understand the risk and the dire need. He convinces them that the only way to save the galaxy is by using their daughter as an unwitting pawn. All that is needed is to guide her to the far side of the chessboard. The parents flatly refuse to sit around waiting when the stakes are this high. After an argument, Jake Skywalker relents. He will appoint a guardian to watch over the girl, just as Kenobi kept an eye on the young Luke. The decision reached, he reaches in to meddle with Rey's memories. Her mind is scoured clean of anything that might give away the plan. The names and faces of her parents, even her own surname, gone. Every childhood memory, every time the family laughed and cried together, Jake couldn't risk leaving anything behind. He ushers the parents out as the new guardian holds young Rey by the hand. A ship takes off and all three fly away. Young Rey is sure that ship departing represents a great loss, but she doesn't know what. Time passes. Eventually, Rey decides that the ship must have been her parents. Everyone has parents, right? Everyone but her. All she had was Guardian, and he wasn't much of a father. Years pass, and one day, Guardian stops moving. No matter how much she pleads or promises to behave, he doesn't respond. He doesn't even blink, even after days. Finally, she kicks Guardian in the shin, and he falls face first into the table. He makes no attempt to catch himself, and clatters to the floor. Rey moves past the stage of bargaining. She thinks back over her life. Guardian never broke a sweat, no matter what. His body hasn't even started to decompose months later. Rey realizes that Guardian had been a human replica droid all along. As far as she can remember, Guardian was the only entity in the galaxy that ever cared about her. Rey swears she'll fix him. If it takes the rest of her life, she'll repair the droid. But to do that, she will need parts and know-how. Adolescent Rey becomes a scavenger. There are a few years of rations left over, but not enough. She'll have to start selling any scrap that won't help bring Guardian back to life. But the parts needed for a human replica droid aren't standard on any make and model. She accepts defeat and lives the rest of her life as a scavenger, until one day the plot catches up with her. When BB-8, Poe, and Finn turn up, something unexpected happens to her. She starts getting flashes of insight, knowing things she couldn't possibly know. When she gets into combat, she fights like a thing possessed. Almost as if she has 1,000 generations of experience guiding her hand. Most of the time, though, that knowledge is out of reach. And there we have it. Sure, it's not ideal, but the previous Disney movies paint this one into a corner. Most of all, it's a way to explain how Rey has abilities that require training without any training. The ideal solution would be to fix these problems at the source. And we will go back to those other two reboot movies, believe me. Now that all the characters have been introduced, it is time to start the main plot. The heroes meet up for a chat. There is a strange conflict added between them. Mr. Poe is opposed to the idea of Rey training. I'm with him, we've just established that it isn't necessary for her. Rey is concerned about the condition of the Falcon. Its rightful owner, Chewbacca, is not asked for his opinion. The data on R2-D2 is decoded, and the heroes scrum for some very sudden news. I'm sure it isn't bad news though. It's not like the Emperor has returned or something. One particularly baffling idea extends throughout the entire movie. A character says there's no time, which prevents any further questions from being asked. There's no time to think, otherwise the audience might start noticing things.
We can't wait that long. We don't have the time.
The time has come.
Oh, I'm sorry, is this a bad time?
In A New Hope, there is one countdown. It starts at 30 minutes, until the Death Star gets a clear line of sight. Ticking timers are not a very common feature of Star Wars. They can exist, but it would be strange and remarkable. Let's see what JJ uses for the timing mechanism. Remember, this is the foundation to the movie. Everything that happens is an attempt to stop this clock.
Somehow Palpatine returned. The largest fleet the galaxy's ever known. In 16 hours, attacks on all free worlds begin.
In this scene, you can almost see the writer's hand twisting the dial to 16 hours. Soon, an enemy fleet will begin to attack the territory of the good guys. That part is absolutely fine. In the original trilogy, the Death Star went from one shot per day to one every few minutes. JJ feels his responsibility is to make something bigger. Start with a planet-sized Death Star shotgun that shoots through hyperspace. End with the biggestest fleet ever, where every Star Destroyer has a Death Star super laser.
They conjured legions of Star Destroyers. The Sith fleet will increase our resources 10,000-fold.
Also, there's a ticking clock now. The galaxy is going to end this afternoon. Imagine there are no planet-destroying super lasers in play. Not a one. Or if you really insist, we can accommodate just one. You see, Palpatine has returned before. After the first Death Star was destroyed, the Emperor executed the man who designed it. Everyone knows who allowed such a flaw to exist. That's right, none other than Bevel Lemelisk. He's the one with the eyepiece, not the devilishly handsome chap. I'm sure Mads is a delightful actor to work with, but he just isn't relevant to the history of the Death Star. I shall deal with him later. Bevel oversaw the creation of the Death Star prototype, built near Kessel, to prove the super laser could work. The prototype had the same 120-kilometer diameter as the first Death Star, but was only a skeletal frame. The prototype had little more than a reactor and main cannon, which were also less powerful than the final version. Nor did it have hyperdrives, or crew quarters, or cells to keep your collection of princesses in. After the prototype was proven, the real Death Star began construction in the Horus system. Back to our man Bevel, who has just died in the most painful way the Emperor can think of. And he can imagine quite a bit. Bit of a waste though, losing such a talented mind. The second Death Star was designed soon afterwards, with Bevel working even harder in his newly cloned body. Just 6 years after the Battle of Endor, in the year 10 ABY, the Emperor was reborn. Having just defeated Grand Admiral Thrawn, the New Republic recaptured a vast swath of the galaxy. This was all part of the cloned Palpatine's plan. His fleet swept in and attacked when the Republic's military was occupied. In this case, he came from deep in the core of the galaxy. He had created a new command vessel, a super Star Destroyer in a class of its own. The Eclipse, immense, painted black for no reason other than to make its enemies afraid. The Victory-class Star Destroyer, the small one that can operate below orbit, is 1 kilometer long. The original Imperial Star Destroyer is 1 mile long, and so are the Imperial IIs. The original Super Star Destroyer, the Executor, is 8 kilometers long. Get on with it? Fine. The Eclipse is 17.5 kilometers long, 10 miles of ship. One of the minor features on it are gravity well generators, or, to use another term for the same device, hyperspace inhibitors. Just as you can't use or enter hyperspace within a planet's gravity well, these gravwell generators do the same for the Eclipse. Its chief weapon is fear and surprise. Oh, and one other thing. By taking the longest straight line in the ship, Palpatine was just barely able to cram a super laser into a spinal mount. This devastating weapon is fully 2/3 of the power of the original Death Star's one. It can't annihilate a planet completely. The prototype of the Death Star could only destroy the core of a planet, and the most Eclipse can do is crack the crust of the planet. That's enough reason to have the special effects shot of a beam devastating a planet. Naturally, Luke Skywalker tracked down and slew Palpatine, then destroyed the cloning tanks. Not before Palpatine slipped away, wearing one last clone body that had been in the vat for only 15 years. Technically, this one died by his own hand, when Leia and Luke destabilized a Force Storm Palpatine had been summoning. The Eclipse was destroyed in the Force Storm, as was this clone body. The next clone and the Eclipse too? A good question for another time.
A good question for another time.
Let's use this. We give Emperor Palpatine a new clone body and the Eclipse, also a large fleet of Star Destroyers. The one thing we don't allow JJ to have is the super lasers. He gets to have just one, and it's nowhere near the size and power of the original. Besides, JJ only blows up one planet in the whole movie. Instead of 1 billion Star Destroyers that can blow up a planet each, just have one really big one, and a large but reasonable fleet of ordinary Star Destroyers.
The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant.
Why did JJ add Death Star super lasers to every Star Destroyer? Surprisingly, it has nothing to do with the power of that planet-killing cannon. The reason is that JJ knows his fleet is too large. His squillion Star Destroyers would prevail over any opposition.
It's insane. It's insane.
To fix this, a normal person would reduce the size of the invasion fleet. The solution JJ came up with was to make every ship 1 million times more deadly. Why would you do this?
We think hitting the cannons might ignite the main reactors.
That's our chance. They'll come if they know there's hope. First Order wins by making us think we're alone. We're gonna show them we're not afraid.
The Star Destroyer fleet has been equipped with the most powerful weaponry the galaxy has ever seen, for exactly one reason. The only role they serve is as a force multiplier. No, not that kind of the Force. Just military might. The super lasers are not intended for this.
The Emperor sent a ship from Exegol. Does that mean every ship in the fleet
has planet-killing weapons? Of course they do.
Destroying planets is not their purpose, it is a pretext, an excuse to install a device needed by the plot. They are intended to solve this issue.
I'm sorry. I thought we had a shot.
It's not your fault, Poe. You weren't responsible for this situation. The one who put you up against far too many Star Destroyers was JJ, because he thought it looked cool. And the only way you survived is because JJ was watching over you.
Hit those underbelly cannons! Everyone we knock out is a world saved!
After creating such an unbalanced fight, one where there is no hope of victory, JJ rebalances it. Now he has his thumb on both sides of the scale. The finale plays out with constant nudges to keep it on course. The only reason the planet-killing guns exist is to be a vulnerability.
Well, the Empire doesn't consider a small one-man fighter to be any threat, or they'd have a tighter defense.
With a big gun slung out of the hangar, one starfighter can beat a Star Destroyer. It's so the inspirational militia can win at all. Without this Achilles heel, Palpatine would have won. One more thing. Logistics. The ticking clock says that in 16 hours, the galaxy will be destroyed. But that's when the fleet gets ready to leave its shipyard. That's not when the bad things happen. Surely, some planets are closer to Exegol, and they'll be destroyed right away. But other star systems are on the far side of the galaxy, so Palpatine's fleet won't arrive until a bit later. There would be a slow process of the fleet advancing through the free systems of the galaxy. By taking out the super lasers, we have a very interesting situation. The Emperor's fleet has to actually fight its battles. There will be a front line, combat both in space and on the ground. There would be a war amongst the stars. If J.J. Abrams had made different decisions, there could have been Star Wars. At every turn, J.J. has done everything he can to prevent Star Wars from happening.
Miss, clumsy.
To prevent each battle within that war, every encounter is one-sided. The super laser destroys any planet without a land battle, or it kills the Star Destroyer without a space battle. Instead of a front line moving as territory is lost, it's just a timer. In 16 hours, the galaxy is all destroyed at once, with no travel time. There's even a timer to wipe out the fleet. Taking off is the only window to attack. If the fleet gets up to space, shields will make it too hard to hit the weak point. Imagine if the movie had been built on a Star War, where Palpatine's fleet is advancing across the galaxy. The progress is inexorable, the situation hopeless.
There is no escape.
the good guys can't win even one battle, let alone the Star War. The most they can do is delay long enough to evacuate a planet, if they're lucky. It's not that every second gets you closer to the end of the galaxy. For that second, trillions of sapient beings suffer under Imperial rule. That's bad enough, don't you think? Using a ticking clock for your story is clumsy and inelegant.
We're approaching the planet Yavin. The rebel base is on a moon on the far side. We are preparing to orbit the planet.
Velocity. The moon with the rebel base will be in range in 30 minutes.
This will be a day long remembered. It has seen the end of Kenobi and will soon see the end of the rebellion.
Stand by alert. Death Star approaching. The rebel base will be in firing range in 7 minutes.
Some on the surface, some on the towers.
Death Star will be in range in 5 minutes.
Evacuate? In our moment of triumph? I think you overestimate their chances.
Rebel base 3 minutes and closing.
The Death Star has cleared the planet. The Death Star has cleared the planet.
Rebel base in range.
You may fire when ready.
This is the most intuitive way to delay the firing of the Death Star. The good guys, the bad guys, and the audience all know the situation. If it was timed around the Death Star's power recharging, the rebellion wouldn't know the time remaining. The original movie used a timer right at the end. It escalates the threat from the start of the finale to the end. In contrast, JJ uses that timer for the whole movie. But worst of all is that a better opportunity was already set up. Adding the 16-hour clock was unnatural. The movie wanted to be about an interstellar war, but it was clumsily diverted. Further, this war is so compelling, it could have held up an entire trilogy.
It's not just the end of 3 movies, it's the end of 9 movies. There's a lot to consider.
You have paid the price for your lack of vision.
Imagine it. The Emperor's fleet extended across half a galaxy, and the Resistance fleet concentrated into a single spearhead strike force. Even with this advantage, it goes from the Star Destroyers winning quickly to them winning slowly. That is the strongest resistance the good guys can manage. The only hope of victory is a decapitation strike. Assassinate the reborn Emperor.
Strike me down with all of your hatred.
Then the entire movie is about the journey to that, and news of the war grinding on in the meantime. After the plan is set into motion, we have a brief shot of Kylo. RJ destroyed JJ's cool mask. JJ gets out the superglue and tries to make it look intentional, just in time for his next meeting. We find out the fleet size. For every Star Destroyer, 10,000 new ones have been built. If the First Order has 100, the Emperor has exactly 1 million. Give Kylo 10,000, and Palpatine has 100 million Star Destroyers. How many Star Destroyers might one need? There are millions of inhabited worlds in the galaxy. Would this new fleet need 1 ship per planet? For that matter, how many Star Destroyers does the First Order have? Surely they must have millions of their own, if they control the galaxy. Or maybe you can keep order with less than a dozen Star Destroyers. Finding the size of the Empire's fleet would offer insight, but I don't have those numbers. Never mind the size of the fleet, Kylo has people to force choke, because that's what Vader did. This fails to be impressive. Kylo's victim is in the middle of raising strategic concerns. Admiral Motti is in the middle of claiming Vader's abilities aren't real. That's the entire point of the scene. Vader also kills his enemies, which doesn't apply here. He kills those officers who repeatedly fail him. Kylo just doesn't have a reason for this. There's no way to tell if JJ intended that to be the case. Given how many other times he's failed to think a reference through, I doubt it was on purpose. Mistaken as it is, this is the most sensible Force use in the entire film. Back on JJ's second imitation of Tatooine, there is a desert party. Rey receives a necklace from an alien child. The necklace is needed immediately, for plot reasons. We will tackle Rey's dyad, teleportation, and healing powers now. It is all part of the same rotten Disney skill tree. This part will be a little messy, and will deal with several plot points, all necessary before we can move forward. Next, there are more unauthorized force powers. The entire finale to the movie is based on 2 or 3 things JJ has invented. To give credit where it's due, he did go back through the script to foreshadow them, or at least, to prevent them from coming out of nowhere to save the day. The first of these new inventions is to reveal that Rey is a witch. Specifically, she is made of wood. JJ has had a great idea. He is extremely pleased with himself. Rey, he explains, is a dryad, an ent wife, a forest spirit that watches over nature, sort of a force Lorax, if you will. She speaks for the trees.
What Palpatine doesn't know is we're a dyad in the Force, Rey. Two that are one.
You know the one. You buy one, you get one free. I said you buy one, you get one free.
I don't know what made him think that was a sensible plan. There is no such thing as a Force dryad in the Star Wars universe, or any other kind of dryad, as far as I know. This was only invented in order to patch holes in the plot. Whenever something absurd happens, he can just wave it away as being dryad magic. After all, if no dryads existed before, JJ can dream up anything at all. Or perhaps this was all Disney, trying to appeal to the Tolnedron demographic. They thought making their newest Disney princess a dryad would be appealing. We can simply reject this idea and move along. It has no basis in fact, the desperate invention of someone who ran out of good ideas. For no reason at all, let's look at a comment Luke made. C-3PO asks how he can help his new master. Luke jokes that nothing can be done unless you can alter time, speed up the harvest, or teleport me off this rock. Luke is not serious. He wants to leave home, and these are jokes. He knows a protocol droid can't do any of these things.
I don't think so, sir. I'm only a droid and not very knowledgeable about such things.
In fact, that nobody can. That holds true for anyone in the Star Wars universe. Obviously, that is no barrier to a Mary Sue. That kind of bad fanfiction character isn't bound by the reality she was shoehorned into. The reality warping field will rewrite the universe in whatever way would be convenient for her. Let's compare the abilities of a Mary Sue to what we already know is laughable. Could she speed up the harvest? I have no doubt. She can probably wring water from a stone, or conjure it from thin air. Could she teleport Luke off the planet Tatooine? Of course she can. Her ability to teleport is essential for the plot of the movie. Could she alter time? I'll give you a hint. The Mary Sue can always do anything. This first shows up in a set of tunnels under the quicksand beans. Why is there quicksand here? Nobody knows.
We're using black beans in order to simulate black sand because they're much easier to push through.
How can one dig a tunnel through gravel?
You have to hold your breath. And panicking.
Just stop asking questions or trying to make sense of the movie.
Will this agony ever end?
Turn your brain off and look at the pretty lens flares. These mysterious tunnels are the home of a monster. When Jedi encounter such things, the scenario plays out in the same way. Luke is dragged into the lair of a wampa and cuts its arm off. Luke is dropped into Jabba's Rancor pit and defends himself to its death. Obi-Wan is to be executed by an Acklay and defends himself to its death. Anakin was assigned a Reek instead, which fails to trample or gore him. Not through lack of trying. Silly Jedi, let Mary Sue Androcles show you how it's done. Turns out, the Jedi were the real monsters. They just enjoy killing things for the sake of it.
Obviously hostile. Okay, Lieutenant, let them have it.
What they should have done is make friends with the beasts, offer them an arm to gnaw on.
And I slaughtered them like animals.
She senses that the giant snake has a thorn in its paw. In response, she invents a new power to deploy.
Look at that!
She has gained the ability of retrometabolism, the secret of reversing matter.
It will be useless for you to resist, for we have discovered the secret of reversing matter, as you have just witnessed.
In order to undo the wound on the snake, she alters time. By rewinding back to before it got injured, the big giant snake is restored to health. This sets up the use of this power another 3 times or so before the end of the movie. This strikes many people as being silly. Gosh, if this was possible in the Star Wars universe, it'd be quite handy. Maybe it has something to do with snake biology, and it doesn't work on anything humanoid. It certainly can't work against lightsaber wounds, or that would have come in handy before. Imagine how different the story would be if you could just Control Z away a stab from a lightsaber. Oh, I see. JJ just didn't think about the implications. The basic idea is quite solid. If you're making a computer game, it makes perfect sense to give a healing option. You can even emphasize character using it. The light side can heal the player with nothing but mana points. The dark side can only drain life from another being. They can't heal without a victim. But computer games aren't realistic, no matter which universe they portray. If your buddy died from bullet wounds, a defibrillator wouldn't help.
You gonna make it?
Contrary to what some might have told you, there is nothing inherently wrong with force healing. It's a natural extension of the force. I'd be more surprised if it could do nothing to heal. Indeed, we find documentation of this back in the West End Games RPG books. There is one difference between JJ's bright idea and what is possible in Star Wars. In the Disney universe, Jedi can cast cleric spells. Rey can yell, "Cure serious wounds," which is the name of a touch spell. It works by channeling positive energy into the target, so it'll damage the undead. Whoops. I might have been reading out a Dungeons & Dragons spell description instead. Still, it just so happens to exactly describe the abilities of a Disney spellcaster. Starts with the laying of hands, and it instantly heals any wound. Convenient. Contrast this with an actual Star Wars RPG. In the West End books, Jedi have a similar power. This one is named Accelerate Healing. As you might infer from the name, this is fundamentally different from D&D and Disney. It allows for a Jedi to heal about twice as fast as normal. If being stabbed with a lightsaber would normally take 8 months to recover from naturally, a Jedi can do it in 4 months. Notice how this way, the Star Wars way, injuries still matter. In Disney Wars, fatal wounds can literally be dismissed with the wave of a hand. That's just an RPG though. Maybe it doesn't line up with either the canon universe or the Disney one. Well, I just happen to have a reference here. It's from the prequel era, and it shows how this power can make things more interesting instead of less. In the first book of the Jedi Apprentice series, Qui-Gon has been injured by a vibroblade. He gets prompt medical treatment and uses the Force to accelerate his healing from there. This actually causes consequences instead of instantly removing them. Qui-Gon Jinn has spent the day using 2 powers, Accelerate Healing and Control Pain. Then he finds a situation where it would be beneficial to use a Jedi mind trick on a Hutt. It is implied that if he were at his full strength, Qui-Gon might be able to. If that's true, it would mean that Jabba's resistance doesn't come from being a Hutt. Hutts are resistant, true, but the rest is because Jabba has a strong mind as well. That would mean that Toydarians have a stronger inherent resistance to mind tricks than the Hutts do.
I'm a Toydarian! Mind tricks gonna work on me!
I'm okay with that. However, Qui-Gon fails to influence the Hutt in question. Because it's possible to use the Force to accelerate healing, that can be used to drain a Jedi's mana pool. It can take other Force powers off the table. It can force a choice between exhausting your reserves to heal or keeping them at the ready for the unexpected. A Jedi is patient.
I cannot teach him. The boy has no patience.
He will learn patience.
J.J. Abrams is impatient, so he can't use the Star Wars approach. If wounds took any time to heal, he wouldn't be able to cram the whole trilogy into a single week. That means the finale has to be completely replaced, which it needed anyway. It wasn't very good, or any good at all. Using the Force to heal is fine, so long as it isn't directly related to the plot. If your story falls apart without the spell Cure Serious Wounds, it was never a Star Wars story to begin with. Finally, we have the other pillar of the finale, Force teleportation. If only Luke had asked Rey to teleport him off that rock instead of asking 3PO. In the Disney reboot universe, it is possible to teleport at will. I can't prove this, but I get the impression JJ thinks he was terribly clever.
We can do anything, Jar Jar.
JJ.
Anything.
Once again, though, JJ will have to share both credit and blame with RJ. This was established as part of the reboot in TLJ, in this scene. It doesn't even have to imply teleportation, though it's clear it's more likely it was supposed to be a teleport. Since Kylo wipes his face with the same hand before looking at it, there are 2 explanations. Either he's gathering the teleported water that splashed onto his face, or he's just been crying. If this was Star Wars, we could eliminate the impossible. What remains, however unlikely, is the truth. In Star Wars, we would know he was crying because teleportation is impossible. Is anyone surprised to hear JJ and RJ went for something that isn't possible? Didn't think so. Now, let's go back to the RPG books. There are 3 sets, 3 systems. The oldest is by West End Games and is based on ordinary cubic dice, the D6. It is generally reliable and covers the era of the original trilogy. If there is a disagreement between West End and a more recent source, I will probably go with the older one, even if the contradictory material is a prequel movie. After leaving West End, the RPG torch was passed to Wizards of the Coast. This version really is just D&D and space, or at least that's how it looks to me. Personally, I've mostly played Dark Heresy, so they look the same. This, the D20 system, is mostly based on the icosahedral die. This one is new enough to take the prequel trilogy into account. If you want to play a Gungan, you can do that here, or you could just run it past your West End DM. The final version is from Fantasy Flight Games. This coincides with the reboot, but I don't believe they're inherently linked. That system uses a variety of dice, D6, D8, D12. They have custom printed faces with a bunch of symbols, which may be more user-friendly, less maths, and they can print those symbols in the rulebooks. It does make it harder to bring your own dice bag though. You'd need a conversion table for each number to the appropriate symbol. Why bring this up? Well, the middle one, Wizards of the Coast, lists a relevant force power. Its name is Fold Space. It allows a character to move an object from one place to another without passing through the space in between. That is to say, it's a teleport. This is limited by both range and the size of the target object. It can scale up to teleport spaceships, but the range still applies. You can probably teleport a data card from surface to orbit, and vice versa. In contrast, the West End system makes no mention of this power. Whatever value this ability offers, it does far more damage than it's worth. Just find a way to write your Star Wars story without teleportation being involved at all. I side with the West End approach on this one. Where force healing is negotiable, teleportation is right out. Looking back at the Disney movies, teleportation is a premium feature of Force Skype. Assuming you maintain your subscription, you can attach physical objects to the messages you send. This is why it only happens once in TLJ. Kylo was using the free edition, and Rey had the free trial of Force Skype. They both upgraded their payment off-camera between movies. Perhaps they even decided to share a family subscription plan. Ooh, spicy. The first time we see Force Skype teleport used, it's to take a necklace. Personally, I reckon teenage Kylo was trying to cop a feel, but missed and got a handful of necklace instead. Analysis of the necklace lets him chase Rey, but why?
Sir, we've had this analyzed. It comes from the Medallion system.
In the reboot, it's well established how tracking works. You walk up to an underling, you demand that he tracks something, and in the next scene that thing has been tracked.
They've tracked us through lightspeed.
That's impossible.
Yes.
That's all there is to it. Tracking is mostly about wanting to know. There's no need to plant a homing beacon or anything like that.
You're sure the homing beacon is secure aboard their ship?
The necklace is mostly to foreshadow Force Skype's new attachments feature. Next, Rey accidentally sends Kylo's expensive replica of Vader's mask to him. This reveals that she's in his bedroom, which isn't quite how Kylo had imagined that happening. The last significant use of teleportation is to solve the problem of Kylo being unarmed. He TLJ'd his own lightsaber, so Rey Force Skyped the one she stole to him. Good riddance. That crossguard saber was an absurd design. You remember how Darth Maul had a double saber? The reason it still worked after the hilt was cut in half is that Maul's is really 2 sabers. There are 2 complete sets of internal components, back to back in an extra large casing. 2 power cells, 2 blade emitters, 2 sets of saber crystals, and 2 complete sets of controls. It's nothing more than a lightsaber with a second one sticking out the back. Asajj Ventress had sabers with a bayonet fitting on the ends, so they could be combined like Maul's one. Contrast this with Exar Kun. This lightsaber was like any other, until he modified it with a second blade emitter matrix. Notice that's the only part that changed. No second power cell, no extra crystals, no double-length casing. We don't know how he managed this, since he used designs from a Sith holocron. This weapon is unique. Nobody else has managed to achieve 2 blade emitters with a single set of internals. Until the reboot. There is no question Kylo's saber must have triple emitters. This can't happen by accident. If someone told you he built a saber with 3 blades by accident, you would know he's lying. I've put 3 light bulbs in my torch, and I can't understand why there are 3 light sources now. You can't have a blade without a blade emitter. It just doesn't work that way. There is 0 chance of extra blades venting out the side. Can't happen. It would be like saying you accidentally transmuted lead into gold and trying to play that off as a failure. Creating a single lightsaber with multiple emitters would be a legendary feat, not some minor oddity. A lightsaber is a closed loop of energy. It shoots out from the emitter, then arcs back to the flux aperture ring. The blade length can be adjusted and is based on amplitude. Suppose he installed side emitters to lower the amplitude of the main blade. That wouldn't work to create crossguard quillions. The side blades would be a significant fraction of the main blade's length, or they'd be much longer. Also, this does not function like the guard on a metal sword. Lightsaber hilts are not immune to lightsaber blades. For the crossguard to work, it would need the gaps to be made of a saber-resistant material, otherwise the guard wouldn't be fit for its purpose. However, if you have access to a saber-resistant material, and you're using it for a lightsaber hilt, and you want a crossguard, you can just make the quillions from Mandalorian iron directly. None of the logical inconsistencies from this design would apply, if that were the design. You could even say he installed red LEDs in the crossguard so it can glow. Now, back to teleportation. The plot of JJ's movie doesn't actually require teleportation at all. Everything that can be accomplished through a teleport can be done another way. Adding teleport powers also causes any number of problems. RJ's first teleport is across the galaxy, to another star system. JJ's first teleport, the necklace, is also vastly interstellar. In both cases, neither party knows where the other is.
As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure which planet I'm on.
It's an instant, unguided teleport to anywhere at all. Since it isn't necessary, forced teleports can, and should, be removed. Otherwise, guess what becomes possible? For one thing, using multiple lightsabers is now easy. One in the hand, and the other can be teleported around. Useful as a distraction, or to ignite the saber into a weak point. But even better, there's one unbeatable attack. Take a thermal detonator. Leia, disguised as Bush, has a heavy Class A model from Merson munitions.
Because he's holding a thermal detonator!
It is particularly powerful. Jabba was well within the blast radius. The standard issue Imperial thermal detonator is carried at the back of a stormtrooper's belt. They have blank control keys to make it harder to use if stolen. The Imperial one has a blast radius of 5 meters. Leia's Class A has a 20-meter radius. Everything within that sphere would be vaporized, while everything else is unharmed. But if you can use the fold space power, the Force can be used to attack, can't be countered. You activate the grenade or thermal detonator, then teleport it into the body of your enemy. There's no way it can be removed from the stomach safely. The best scenario is that a vibroblade or lightsaber is handy, and the other guy can cut it out before the bomb goes off.
Hang on, kid.
However, the utility of teleportation doesn't end with telefragging. Imagine how the history of the galaxy would play out if Force users could teleport. The Jedi wouldn't be known as Guardians of Peace and Justice. The Jedi would be the Navigator Guild, the Navis Nobilite. With their unmatched teleportation abilities, there could be no better way to move objects to anywhere in the galaxy. If it was possible to force teleport in Star Wars, the history of the galaxy would be completely different. Wait a minute. The history of the Disney Wars universe is indeed completely different from Star Wars. Like the rest of JJ's ending, this is completely unsalvageable. It isn't necessary, and it isn't possible. That means taking this absurd idea out won't even change anything of consequence. Nothing in the reboot trilogy would even be affected, except the bits that never made any sense. The simplest explanation seems the most likely. JJ thinks the Force is like magic or a superpower. He can just do anything he wants. No constraints exist on the writing. That isn't even how good wizards are written, or superheroes. I'm quite certain JJ never planned to include Lando. When he does, it's implemented as a reference to the originals. Lando Calrissian is undercover in the Land of Sand. What a surprise for this to have happened again. Look, he's even got something on his wrist. Okay, so it's the outside of his left wrist instead of the inside of his right. Close enough for fans of the reboot. Lando was just the next name on the list. After Disney has killed the primary heroes of the original trilogy, Lando is on the chopping block. His character is mostly intact, surprisingly. Nothing shown here conflicts with his original character. There isn't very much shown, and I might have written it differently. Still, at least it is consistent. Kylo has exploited Rey's teleportation magic, and now knows where our heroes are. They have to make a getaway. Excuse me?
They fly now!
What was that?
They fly now!
Can you say that again?
They fly now!
I'm not quite sure I heard you.
They fly now!
Would you mind repeating the same words another few dozen times? This dialogue is silly. Is it meant to be a joke? I'm not laughing, and the characters aren't laughing. This is no laughing matter. But if we assume this is meant to be serious, the tone is completely wrong. Perhaps this is supposed to be comic relief, instead of just failed comedy. Comic relief is a traditional part of Star Wars, a moment of levity to enhance seriousness. Think of Jar Jar and 3PO. They allow the rest of the movie to stay serious.
Hello, boyos. Shield generator's been hit. How?
It's about managing the emotions of the audience to stop them from getting desensitized to the Star War. The scene starts with hot-wiring a pair of ramshackle land speeders.
We've spotted the fugitives.
Then, the duck troopers arrive on their own vehicles. This is the infamous, tread speeder? This is okay, I might enjoy riding one of them myself. But you have to ask yourself what the point of the tracks is.
Bad guys are on these kind of weird motorcycle skidoo things.
Tracks are good over moderately rough terrain, where wheels can't go. Because the weight is spread out, ground pressure is lower than with wheels or legs. That would be an argument for using continuous track on a sand planet, to avoid sinking into dunes. The downside of tracks is extra maintenance and a lower top speed. This seems like a solid set of arguments to make tracked bikes. However, this is Star Wars. We've definitely seen tracked vehicles, but you can't exactly drag race a sandcrawler. There is one other option that Earth doesn't have. Repulsor lifts. We've seen Luke's land speeder, Jabba's sail barge, and Scout Trooper speeder bikes. Almost every advantage to tracks is trumped by repulsors. Terrain doesn't matter until it's as tall as the hover ceiling, completely bypassed. Ground pressure is non-existent. We don't see sand reacting to the weight floating above it. Further evidence comes from Jar Jar Binks' introduction. Qui-Gon tackles them to the ground and an MTT transport floats over the pair. We see air blowing for the cooling exhaust, but these are repulsor craft, not hovercraft. The weight must be transferred directly to the world's gravity well, not to the ground underneath. The multi-troop transport is extremely heavy, most of it is armor and repulsors. We'd expect Qui-Gon to be crushed if ground pressure applied underneath repulsor craft. All repulsor lifts have one very simple limitation to their use. A gravity well to push off is necessary. Though, as we can see, the ITO interrogator droid can hover inside the Death Star, which clearly has artificial gravity. So the same repulsors that allow it to float on a planet must also work when exposed to the equivalent artificial gravity. Most people pay no attention to the artificial gravity. We know at least 62% of all films are shot on Earth, so we're not surprised by gravity staying 1G in all the footage. It also turns out that tracks can be a vulnerability. The First Order looked at a hoverbike and intentionally replaced it with this. Why is the continuous track offset so far to the front? Traditionally, tanks and bulldozers have their tracks underneath instead of this position. Moving the track underneath would make it far safer. Alternatively, extending a thin armor shroud over the exposed track would have saved this bike. When this grapple attempt happens, we're meant to think of T-47 versus AT-AT. Instead, I'm reminded of the 74Z speeder bikes from back in the Star Wars universe. They have exposed steering vanes which could be tangled as easily as tracks can. Still, they chose to show a kind of failure that the OT design was immune to. What else am I supposed to conclude about this vehicle? There is one Star Wars advantage to tracks. As you may remember, shields can be bypassed by a grounding connection. If there were a planetary shield in use, a tracked vehicle could pass right through. In that one scenario, tread speeders would be superior to hovering speeder bikes. Of course, JJ can't use that, because he later declares that shields don't work in atmosphere. Also, our new heroes are on repulsor craft, so they'd be stopped by a shield. If I were consulted on this, and couldn't change much of the scene, I'd alter course. Show the terrain as being something suited for tracks over repulsors. What might that look like? Well, look at Luke's X-34 Landspeeder. It has 3 turbine engines, making their distinctive high-pitched whine.
Hit the accelerator!
These are like the propulsion fan in an airboat. They provide only thrust. Keeping the machine up as buoyancy or repulsors, a completely unrelated principle. I bet these are weak to hills. I'm quite fond of Darth Maul's speeder bike. It's something different from the Scout Troopers in Episode 6, but still believable. My physical reference on it is from 2012, right before the reboot line. The make and model are Razalon FC20. Apparently the bike is named the Bloodfin, which sounds about right. His Sith infiltrator is identified as the Scimitar. We also see him ride the bike off a cliff. It immediately drops down and continues at the same height above the ground as before. This proves land speeders have a hover ceiling, tuned to be quite low to the surface. The Empire's 74Z bikes top out at 25 meters. The sail barge was the best Jabba could afford, and could achieve 10 meters. Like the MTT, the sail barge can use repulsor lifts for propulsion. Though there is a small green thruster visible, that's true of Maul's bike as well. Luke's Incom T-16 Skyhopper is an air speeder instead. We all know that a T-16 has similar controls to an Incom T-65 X-Wing, or a T-47 Snowspeeder. Skyhopper repulsor lifts can reach 300 kilometers up. It wouldn't make sense that its altitude changes just because Beggar's Canyon happened to be underneath. I have to conclude that on a hill, a land speeder will strain its repulsors more from trying to keep itself level without touching the ground, and that going uphill will put more work on the thrust turbines, whereas to a bike with wheels or tracks, hills are no big deal. Okay, now, on a desert planet covered in sand, can anyone think where some hills might be? This brings us to the only other feature of JJ's tracked bike. The toy will come with a spring, so it can launch your action figures across the room. On a chase over perfectly flat ground, it's no real advantage. Suppose the chase actually took place across a field of sand dunes. If the goodies have any head start, they might be hidden from the baddies. Now the man catapult comes in. Take the trooper riding pillion, use the bike to launch him into the air. Now he can see exactly where the prey is, and relay that back to all the bike teams. Suddenly, I'm no longer confused about whether this scene is comedy or not. This is a sensible tactic for the situation. It makes you think the stormtroopers have done this before, or at least have thought about it. You could even play it for laughs. Boing, there's a falling sand trooper. Then it dawns on our heroes that while we laugh at their antics, vision goes both ways. The snarl of bike engines drifts over the dunes, and the soldiers sweep in from all directions. Look at how easy that was, how the scene writes itself for you. The lore partially controls your actions, but it also obeys your commands. Our established lore tells you the will of the canon. When you learn to quiet your mind, you'll hear it speaking to you. As soon as you set up the premise, we know Imperial forces should want to fight in the dunes. I've already gone on for longer than the chase scene, so it's time for this.
They fly now!
Only now will I allow them to fly. I have no problem with flying stormtroopers. In fact, I would immediately interrogate JJ for the specifications. Look, matey, I can accomplish that for you in at least 3 distinct ways. You've got to consider these things. Wait, no, there's 4 or 5 ways. What are the existing Star Wars options? In one hand there's a jetpack, on the other hand there's a rocket pack, and on the final front hand, there are still repulsor lifts. I'll explain the implications of each, but there are 2 exotic options. One would be wings, presumably a mechanical set more like insect than bat or bird wings. Another would be lifting gas, inflating one or more balloons from a backpack tank. These two are probably more trouble than they're worth. Let's start with the rocket pack. These are powerful, and they just work. Doesn't matter if you're on Hoth or Dagobah or in a Sarlacc, the rocket pack is your reliable companion. The Old Republic used rocket jumper troopers a few thousand years ago. Bit thirsty on the fuel consumption, so you can't run it for ages. Just like 20th century Earth rockets, they carry all the fuel and oxidizer needed. A rocket pack doesn't care if it's underwater, in vacuum, or if the air is pure nitrogen. The other main option are jetpacks. These are a bit simpler, cheaper, and more compact than rocket packs. These have air intakes, so only tanks of fuel are needed. This means jetpacks can only work in a breathable atmosphere. Personally, I spend a lot of time in breathable atmospheres, so jets will do fine. Boba Fett and I happen to agree on this one. Jango Fett used much the same model, but with a different missile attached. Finally, repulsor packs. If you think jetpacks are cool, you probably won't like these. The key factor is speed, which a repulsor pack can't give you. With a small man-portable flight pack, it's all a trade-off. Repulsors give you the ability to linger effortlessly for hours at a time. They're also more precise in their movement, more agile and controllable. So, not much use in combat, but very practical. You might bring a repulsor pack with you to any number of jobs, but a jetpack is more of a hobby item. The ideal solution would be to combine the two technologies into a hybrid pack. It will be bulky, there's no getting around that. With the repulsor to keep you aloft and the jets giving a speed boost, it's the best of both options. Anything a jetpack can do, the hybrid can do better, except being able to face sideways and walk through a door. The hybrid's probably not what the Empire would pick though. They'd most likely go for a jetpack, which is what appears to happen in the movie. Verdict? They fly now is absolutely fine. The flying part anyway. The vehicles and use of terrain? Abysmal. It's less like a car chase, more of a, well, it was genuinely filmed on rails.
What we're doing is we're building a track. We're building two, in fact. One's going to be a camera track, and one's going to be a vehicle track.
No wonder it looks like the whole sequence is a linear track directly from plot point L to K. One more thing, it turns out this quicksand is another reference, but not to Star Wars.
Keep away from the sinking fields in the north, you'll drown in the sand.
This is a reference to a previous JJ movie. He invents the planet Jakku, which has quicksand, but JJ never shows these sinking fields. Later he invents a new desert planet named Pisana. By an amazing stroke of luck, this planet has the same hazard JJ invented for the other planet.
any bugs. I don't wanna drink that shit. That will never work on chip. I don't wanna live in a pod. I don't wanna eat any bugs. I don't wanna drink that shit. That will never be no. I don't wanna live in a pod. I don't wanna eat any bugs. I don't wanna drink that shit. That will never work on chip. I don't wanna live in a pod. I don't wanna eat any bugs. I don't wanna drink that shit. That will never be no.
You will know it is time to turn the page when you hear R2-D2 beep like this.
It's called free speech.
No, it's called hate
You're
speech.
communist fat.
Now it's time to talk about the droids. R2-D2 is well loved by fans, often one's favourite character of all. As for C-3PO, he is far less popular. Still, it's possible to have him in interesting scenarios. A deliberate choice was made with C-3PO. They decided to say that he can translate the Sith language, but that he refuses to. This is an obvious reference to Star Wars 6 in the Ewok village. That's against my programming to impersonate a deity. That's a good reference to have, because this is the single best example of 3PO's character. You can say it's just programming, but that's still a characteristic of who he is.
Well, why don't you use your divine influence and get us out of this?
I beg your pardon, General Solo, but that just wouldn't be proper. It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
There are better ways to do the same job. This plot point does several things. The most important is a fake death scene, which is in itself another reference. It also serves to add complexity to the plot. One more hurdle erected on the road to the final boss fight. Plus, this introduces a droid specialist named Frick. Frick is cute as heck, arguably the most popular character in the movie. To say I've fixed something, the new version needs to better accomplish the same goals. Otherwise, I haven't fixed anything, I've just replaced it. These movies are not irredeemable. On the contrary, they are so easy to fix, you can retain almost everything about them.
That's funny. The damage doesn't look as bad from out here. Are you sure this thing is safe?
All it would have taken was a moment's thought from anyone involved. You don't even need an expert, just to listen to somebody who's moderately informed. Run all your bright ideas past him, half-end with a veto, and the rest are reworked to be possible within Star Wars. Saying 3PO can translate but won't is the same as if he can't. Functionally, it changes nothing, except maybe subverting expectations. Bet you never predicted this to happen. And once again, that feature is one that we can retain while fixing it. Does it make sense for a droid built for etiquette and protocol to speak Sithlish? Yes and no, but I reckon mostly no. He can figure out a translation for the Ewoks, and not because he knew it already. The language has similarities to the 6 million he already knows, and 3PO can learn the rest.
New acquisitions. How many languages do you speak?
I am fluent in over 6 million forms of communication and can readily...
Splendid.
The Sith were thought to be extinct for a millennium, about 50 years ago.
Impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
Let's handle the complexity first. An obvious answer will be that 3PO can't read Sith yet. This gives the team an errand to run, looking for a way to learn the language. That alone could fill an hour of runtime, and we haven't even started being creative. Perhaps they can go to a museum and look at an engraved Sith tablet. Maybe it's gibberish, and 3PO can immediately tell this is a replica, so they break in and look for the original. Whatever they try, it doesn't work. Then they track down the required component. C-3PO was built with a Tranlang 3 communications module. Times change, and that won't be top-notch anymore. Maybe they buy, borrow, or steal a Tranlang 4 module to replace it. Maybe a cantankerous archaeologist named Laraz Croft put together a module containing the Sith language. The most logical place to look for these parts is inside another protocol droid. The galaxy is not short on options. One we know would be compatible is a military M3PO, not a battle droid, despite coming with spooky red glowing eyes as standard. The M3PO is built to handle paperwork the soldiers don't want to put up with. Imagine its personality when talking to C3PO. Another model, the PD series, is fully sealed and weatherproofed. C3PO is better at his job, because the PD is also built for genetic manipulation. The LOM series is a cheeky copy of the 3PO by a different manufacturer. Not exactly handsome, but then again, I'm not in the target demographic. They are reasonably popular with the various insectoid races of the galaxy, a bit more calm than the competition, and we don't mention the one that's a bounty hunter.
No disintegration. Bounty hunters? We don't need that scum.
Similar looking, there is the J9 worker drone. People say they were made by the Verpine in Roche, but that's for short. It's Roche Hive mechanical design and construction activity for those who need the Hive's machines. The J9 drone was a protocol droid, but only had a Tranlang 2 module by default. No reason one of them couldn't have been upgraded by now, though. Another distinctive one is the CZ made by Servo Droid. These were built to be secure comlink and messenger droids. Its memory banks are so secure, you'd have to talk it into willingly giving you the data. We see some non-functional ones destroyed by Jabba the Hutt.
Fit him with a restraining bolt and take him back up to His Excellency's main audience chamber.
R2, don't leave me!
This one is CZ3, after Jabba had installed a surveillance module.
Look at this. Ever since the XP-38 came out, they just aren't in demand. It'll be enough.
Perhaps the most likely to have a Sith module is the RA-7 personal assistant. These all started out in Imperial service, to the point Death Star droid means only this model. They were common, but not considered very good at what they do, unless you're in the Imperial Security Bureau, that is. The real purpose is to spy on Imperial officers, which is useful right now. Suppose a Death Star droid had seen a researcher handling Sith artifacts. That might be enough for C-3PO to learn the Sith language. Or an ancient model, the SE-4, which make decent translators. They'll speak Bocce and Huttese, but might not know any Shriwook. However, there's already a slot on its chest for a skill module. This one detail makes it perfect for our purposes, as C-3PO doesn't have this slot at all. It's impossible to use a skill package from an SE-4 in a 3PO, not without a droid technician. R2-D2 and C-3PO are two of the most famous droids ever built. In the original lore, their manufacturers noticed and acted accordingly. Some 3PO series protocol droids are over 100 years old.
Hello, I am C-3PO Human-Cyborg Relations.
Now there exists the C series, from C1 to the C9. Cyborg Galactica has officially stated that this is not intended to cash in on C-3PO's fame.
How rude!
How does C-3PO feel about the new model to replace him? Is it any good? Wait a minute. If there's a new model, why drag this old thing around?
This R2 unit of yours seems a bit beat up. You want a new one? Not on your life. That little droid and I have been through a lot together.
Our heroes rush through the process of installing the upgrade. It doesn't work.
All right, don't lose your temper. I'll come right back and give you a hand.
C-3PO explains that the digital certificate on this part expired 6 years ago, or worse, is unofficial. He could not install this language pack without a license key. The team considers buying a subscription, but the Cyborg Galactica head office is closed today, or they just got taken over by the Empire. They're out of their depth, so finally they call Babu Frick. The technician can sort this out, thank Frick. The manufacturer condemns user modifications, but this is what Frick does all day. It'll just mean resetting the droid to factory settings, and that's no loss at all. By the way, when was the last time you had your 3PO unit's memory erased? If you don't wipe them regularly, they can get quite peculiar. This is the other reference, a reference to the very first Star Wars movie. After buying 2 droids, Owen Lars tells Luke to have 3PO's memory erased. It never happens in the end, except after the prequels.
I'm placing these droids in your care. Treat them well, clean them up, have the protocol droid's mind wiped.
What? Oh no.
It's clear in A New Hope that 3PO doesn't remember everything the same way R2 does. A memory wipe is a good way to pull off a fake death scene for him.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
taking one last look, sir, at my friends. Memory restoration complete.
But instead of a foolhardy legal excuse, have something the audience sees differently from the characters. Where we think, oh, that's like jailbreaking or rooting a phone, the characters are outraged. You mean we have everything to save the galaxy, but a company's greed has stopped us? Frick. Hey Frick, can you circumvent the DRM and install this for us?
Copy, Frick. Can you help us with this?
Notice how there are a dozen fake deaths in this movie? I suspect these are a cheap way to prompt emotions from the audience, yet without the constraint of that character really dying. In Star Wars, only Anakin Skywalker had a fake death, from a certain point of view. We all know Boba Fett escaped the Sarlacc, but that wasn't in the movie.
Some ideas I have for J.J. Abrams' 7th chapter, hand down from the twin sons of Tatooine. We are now after a beat. The gloved Mandalorian armor grabs onto the sand outside the Sarlacc pit, and the feared bounty hunter pulls himself from the maw of the sand beast.
JJ's has the wrong approach entirely. The lack of care affects the plot, to be sure. It also shows up in the smallest details of the costumes. Sometimes they imitate the shape of something we know. The function of these details, nobody in authority knows about. Before the Death Star wreck sequence, there is another plot coupon to collect. This item is called a Medallion. When inserted into a ship's CD player, it acts as a key.
Medallion's good. Clear for entrance into Hangar 12.
The plot calls for our new heroes to stroll around a fully armed and operational Star Destroyer. How could they possibly manage to do that? Well, this medallion is a ticket past all the logical hurdles to that plan.
That's First Order Captain's medallion. I've never seen a real one.
Free passage through any blockade. Landing privileges, any vessel.
But this is a new item JJ has invented. So let's see what already existed that he could have used. Have a look at these pictures. Notice anything these men have in common? That's right, they're all carrying several pens we never see them write with. Why would Grand Moff Tarkin need 4 different ballpoint pens? This object from the Star Wars universe is called a rank cylinder. It's a good thing they don't smell as rank as a trash compactor, because they are never far from one's nose. Officers within the Empire's military would display these on their uniforms, next to any medals they might have.
Since you are reluctant to provide us with the location of the rebel base, I have chosen to test this station's destructive power on your home planet of Alderaan.
Like medals, having many rank cylinders isn't the same as being important, but both items do imply prestige and power, which I'll explain in a moment.
Oh, I didn't know you had any medals. What are they?
3 years long service, 6 years long service, 9 years long service, 12 years long service.
In the Star Wars universe, there is no such thing as the First Order.
It does not exist.
When the Empire fell after the Battle of Endor, it didn't happen overnight. What was left of the Empire formed into the Imperial Remnant, a powerful faction for decades to come. The Imperial Remnant still uses rank cylinders, and the New Republic has equivalent tech in things like ID cards. Technically speaking, this cylinder is a dongle. To access restricted areas or files, you must insert your rank cylinder and key in the correct access code. Your permissions are linked to this, and the system records your every move. It also stores what we call biometric data: fingerprints, voice, retina, that sort of thing. Of course, even the Empire has more than a few non-humans in the ranks, and many more as contacts. We can't assume every race has dermatoglyphic features on its fingers, or that it has fingers, or, if it has fingerprints, that they uniquely identify an individual. As for why officers have more than one rank cylinder, that's one for each facility they have access to. You could imagine an Imperial courier ending up with several cylinders, despite the lack of prestige. Keeping them separate is an important security feature. Stealing a rank cylinder from the Death Star won't do any good on a Super Star Destroyer. Let's compare them. JJ's First Order Captain's Medallion allows anyone to access anything. The rank cylinder gives a specific officer access to what he should need. According to the Disney Wars trademark databank, registered trademark, First Order officers use data medallions to verify their identities while traveling, with the devices transmitting encrypted codes. Such verifications help cut through bureaucratic snarls and maintain secrecy during covert operations. Quite right, it would seem. Very useful for covert operations against the First Order. 2 sentences on this plot-crucial item in the databank, and a whole half of them are the explanation required for the plot. My hard copy references on rank cylinders span multiple pages, printed in '97 naturally. The original key solution, in the form of rank cylinders, has existed since the 1970s. Let's play Spot the Difference.
This is Leeds changing. Do you see? This is Jacoby reborn. Do you see?
Do you see? Yes, that's right. Those maniacs finally really did it. They created a worse version of something that has existed for 30 years, and they did this while looking right at a better solution, and erasing it. The medallion has no security of any kind. It works for anyone holding it. The rank cylinder has a password on it, and support for biometric scanners. The medallion has no limitations on its use. It belonged to a ship captain, who either had it stolen or sold it himself. Yet the First Order doesn't know a medallion went missing, whereas the Empire changes the rank cylinder passwords on a monthly basis. This writes a whole scene for you. Our heroes would need to get a rank cylinder, but not any old one. It needs to come from an officer stationed where they want to infiltrate. Tracking down this guy can take any path, over any length of time. When you have the right officer, you then need to steal the correct rank cylinder. On top of that, you need to get the correct password for that exact dongle. Biometric security can be ignored if you want, or take up several minutes. And after all that, you have a ticking timer to use it by. The rank cylinder could stop working at any second the writers want it to. Using this instead of the captain's medallion not only gives more options, it looks better. It makes both sides, goodies and baddies, seem more competent.
As clumsy as he is stupid.
A costume designer somewhere accidentally made this worse. The Disney universe is full of various pens. Both TLJ and TFA have uniforms with many cylinders. These are superficial details. They have no purpose for the characters. A lot of things are superficial copies, and not always from Star Wars. There is certainly no regard for how any of this works. All sci-fi is basically the same, right? The movie doesn't convey the location well, but the setting for this part of the story is another moon in the Endor system. Some assume it's a complete mistake, that the wreckage can't fly at light speed and would need to spend decades to drift a single parsec. Disney did actually solve this by putting the wreck on a nearby moon of the same gas giant.
The Emperor's Wayfinder is in the Imperial Vault at Delta 36, transient 936, bearing 32 on a moon in the Endor system.
They just didn't give the audience any indication that anyone knew about this pitfall. The easiest topic is the earliest on screen. The Falcon would not crash land like a Galaxy-class saucer. At this point, the Millennium Falcon is en route to Endor. The crash is hit up with one moment of dialogue.
I don't know why they're not following us, but I don't trust it. Landing gear's busted, how busted?
Okay, something is wrong with the landing gear. That's a very specific problem. The ones discussing the problem are Chewie and Mr. Poe, the being who knows the Falcon better than anyone else in the galaxy, and a pilot. They should both know a hyperdrive from a hydrospanner, a laser cannon from a landing leg. If these two say the shield projector has been hit, it won't be the shield generator instead. Let's take a look at how the Falcon lands normally, with full use of its landing gear. Without landing gear, the ventral turret will be crushed, the boarding ramp won't open, and the ship won't be level. But that leaves the dorsal turret and the top hatch from Empire Strikes Back. We know what it means for the landing gear to be busted. In JJ's movie, the Falcon plows a trench through the dirt. This is the sort of crash landing you might see on an aeroplane if its landing gear was busted. Instead of rolling to a stop, the jumbo jet scrapes along the ground. This is exactly what you'd expect from a vehicle made using 20th century Earth technology. Based on the trench it carved, I'm convinced this is an imitation of the movie Star Trek Generations. From the moment the saucer of the Enterprise D hits the atmosphere, it takes more than 3 minutes to stop. This is a tragic scene where all the characters aboard are in peril. The ship they love makes one last effort to keep them safe, even as she's rent asunder. It needs to be that long a scene, otherwise we don't feel the weight of it. Regardless of what the inspiration was, it isn't correct for the dialogue. A landing gear failure on the Falcon would never cause this. Spaceships in the Star Wars universe have 3 distinct engine systems. The most visible are the sublight engines. The old lore says sublights have harmful emissions and mustn't be used in the atmosphere. That is false. We can clearly see the Falcon's engines flare when it blasts off from Docking Bay 94.
Oh my, I'd forgotten how much I hate space travel.
The wiki acquired by the mouse seems to have picked up this detail. This has confused some people because I describe it as old lore, yet only the new discanon section mentions it. The Legends part of the Rodent wiki does not have that detail. Those who depend on this wiki for their lore are left confused. I have tracked down the origin of this detail. In 1996, there was no mention of harmful sublight exhaust. It's not in the description of sublight engines in the Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels. Then, in 1998, the cross-sections book for the OT was released. In the introduction, it covers the 3 engine systems. As far as we can tell, this is the first mention of dangerous radioactive emissions. In the expanded universe, this does not ring true. We never see this depicted. No starship ever flies with inactive sublights until a certain distance from a city. It doesn't line up, so the book must be wrong. After the reboot, the Disney universe was undefined. No knowledge truly existed about it, because JJ might contradict the expanded universe. As they published a new set of books, to replace the existing lore, this factoid was swept in. But notice how it mutates in the process. The area changes from near people to the whole atmosphere. The motivation changes from causing no harm to following the lore. In the 1998 book, this describes the behavior of pilots. They use their engines in this way because of radiation. This is a fun detail for some setting, but it doesn't fit into Star Wars. In the Discanon article, it talks about laws. Because the lore in question contradicts the movies, more is needed. Every time we see sublight engines used in the atmosphere, that's illegal. The Falcon needs to escape fast, so Han breaks all the laws.
Miners, not miners.
It certainly adds a little tension. Oh no, Han's hot rod doesn't have a catalytic converter installed. When the Falcon blasted out of Mos Eisley, that meant the illegal use of its engines. Will the scoundrel get a ticket and pay a fine? In 1998, pilots use repulsor lifts near civilization. Irradiating the locals would not be the right thing to do, so it's a fact that pilots avoid doing it. In the 2018 Disney book, it's illegal anywhere in atmosphere. Sublights should be for emergencies, but everyone uses them all the time. We never see anyone obey this law. If that's the case, how harmful can these emissions even be? Is the law pointless, the Empire extorting fines from the locals? Trying to keep this scrap of law is more trouble than it's worth.
I hope no one irradiates us with their sublight engines.
I do not share your lowly female anxieties. Sublight engines are prohibited this close to civilization.
Time to drop it and move on. If the sublight engines break down in deep space, you're dead in the water, becalmed. Can't move the ship, so you'd better fire up a distress beacon. Another engine is the hyperdrive, which doesn't move the ship so much as shunt it into hyperspace. We all know what happens when the hyperdrive doesn't work.
Watch this.
Watch what?
I think we're in trouble.
The final drive system is a repulsor lift. If you have no landing gear at all, that's still no problem. You can gently coast down on repulsor lifts, making a safe and controlled landing. To fix this, the dialogue would need to say broken repulsor lifts instead. That gets you almost the same result, but with one huge difference. JJ shows the Falcon crashing like an aeroplane. To be in the Star Wars universe, in this scenario, it needs to be flying backwards. Without repulsors, the only way to slow down is like a moonlander, using sublight engines to hit the brakes. There are two paths to a landing. One is to come down almost vertical, with the engines facing the ground, and the cockpit pointing to space. Using the main sublight engines, we bring the speed down from orbital velocity. As the last of the speed gets scrubbed off, the Falcon will fall over, hopefully belly down onto the landing gear. This is extremely violent, not good for the ship or its contents. It's a good excuse to break the Falcon for plot reasons. The other option is coming in at a very shallow dive, flying backwards with engines to the front. It's the same as the vertical one in the end. When it runs out of speed, the Falcon drops out of the sky. The difference is that this one doesn't have any rotation, as the ship is already horizontal, and this can plough a trench. Either flight path would look spectacular and be unprecedented but true to Star Wars. It would certainly be more exciting than having the crash happen off camera. This location has a particularly rare resource. Apparently, the whole world is full of ex-stormtroopers. I'm told there's speculation about their parentage, that all the Disney stormtroopers are Lando's children. That doesn't quite sound right to me. There is a lot to be said about Disney stormtroopers. Stealing children and waiting for them to grow up is rather odd. It's not particularly efficient, and it means the First Order have been operating for a long time. We would expect this idea to be more prominent. Are Disney troopers trained in horseback riding? If not, the mutineers needed to learn that on this world. There's no need for a Lando connection, because their predicament is interesting on its own. An entire movie could have been dedicated to rallying the ex-stormtroopers. They don't fill the role of Ewoks, because we spent time with the Teddies. A colony of deserters could be entertaining, but it isn't in the movie. Now it's time to deal with the last of the plot coupons. JJ's movies are based on locating an item, which eventually leads you to the end credits. In this case, there is a book, which points to a pyramid. To get the pyramid, a knife is required. To get the knife back, a medallion is needed. Getting the pyramid unlocks the end of the movie. The knife had a lot of thought put into it, and it was still a rotten idea. They weren't trying to portray the Sith as gormless. They just had a limited amount of time. They also assumed that the lore ran as deep as their known unknowns, so it didn't matter. In fact, their unknown unknowns are fathomless. Let's be clear, JJ did his best to foresee all the problems with the knife. He did steer clear of Skilla, but set a course directly into Charybdis. This isn't a question of canon. The knife doesn't work in any universe. This behind-the-scenes footage shows JJ designing the knife.
I was imagining sort of something where it's like if this came down, it would be one thing. And I just love the arrow. So you go, that's where it is.
The shape of the knife blade is supposed to match wreckage on the horizon. The problem is normally said to be geometry. The knife points to a different destination depending on where you're standing, which is true but not necessarily damning. The Death Star is on the horizon. It's too big to be any closer. According to the Disney section of the wiki, this moon has a diameter of 3,725 kilometers. That means the horizon is 8.6 kilometers away, when the knife is 10 meters above sea level. Assuming you can line it up within 1 degree of accuracy, you have 3,626 square meters to stand on. That would make your search area the same size, a square 60 meters or 200 feet per side. Not good, but close enough if you're sufficiently motivated. What actually makes the knife nonsensical? Erosion. The movie itself makes it clear that exposed to the elements, the Death Star wreck is losing. It's falling apart, corroding, and it absolutely will not stay in the same shape over multiple decades in the ocean. In this case, the map will last longer than the territory, so we have to replace the knife. From that clip earlier, there were many alternative props. First, this pentagon-based object made of leather. It needs to be held up to the light, perhaps to overlay the maps on each face. This works fine, but there is a claim the map object needs to be more durable. Next, we have scrolls. Some of these are clearly less sturdy than the leather, but not others. One of them is a segmented scroll, made of narrow strips of a hard material. This is an easy winner. It looks interesting, it's unlike anything seen in a Star Wars movie, and it doesn't have the issues of the knife. Another prop on the table almost looks like a lightsaber hilt. Presumably, this is a hologram projector, which is a good way to store a map. We've seen R2-D2 project a holomap on Naboo.
R2, we can enter the city using the secret passages on the waterfall side.
There's also a squat cylinder with no discernible function. Even that can't be worse than the knife. Finally, this one. It could be much more simple, a slab or tablet. That works too. It's absolutely sufficient to write down some coordinates. Every single prop JJ turned down was a better idea than the knife. Replacing the knife gets you an entirely new direction. Whatever the new item is, it has different implications from the knife. Those hints tell you how to write the rest of the story. The leather and the holomap imply different histories to the map they contain. The movie makes a point of describing the sea voyage as dangerous. Granted, it does seem like a bad situation for a boat. It would be nice if there existed some kind of other craft. Where Rey's boat floats on water, what about floating in air? Like a helicopter, or helijet, or air speeder, or a spaceship. Even a speeder bike will have a hover ceiling that can ignore most waves. Somehow, we arrive in the Death Star ruins. A scene takes place in the Emperor's throne room. There is a well-placed dark side introspection scene. This idea is great. No place in the Endor system is as steeped in the dark side of the Force. Palpatine's throne room is exactly where you'd expect something like the Dagobah cave to happen. On paper, I should love it.
What was never in the original films is a secret vault room, accessed through his throne room.
So we've taken a bit of liberty,
Dark
so that
light.
actually it was always there, you just didn't notice it.
There was a reason never to have a door there, when it cannot have ever been there. Where is the throne room? This is an enormous battle station, so perhaps the most secure part of the superstructure, down by the main reactor, or by the south edge of the super laser dish. That can't be it. The throne room windows have a view of space in all directions. It is above the surface. If you were to approach the north pole of the space station, you would not have a Merry Sithmas. A long way off, you'd notice the turbo laser turrets are more densely clustered. Then a spire 100 stories tall, with the combination of shields, physical armor, and defensive firepower. This is the most secure place anywhere in the Death Star. But even Disney knew about this to some extent. There exists concept art showing a fallen version of the tower back from their first movie, Disney Wars 7. Somehow, that knowledge was lost over the trilogy. Why can't there be a flight of stairs leading outward from the throne room? Because that door would open into hard vacuum. Can't imagine the Emperor would be pleased if you told him he was one door malfunction away from suffocating. The way it's depicted in the movie, if you go through that door, you would end up on the exterior of the tower, walking deeper into empty space. Okay, but besides that, why can't there be a secret room up there that we've never seen? Because we already saw the tower, and it doesn't have any unsightly growths on it. An exterior afterthought room like that is not secret. We're not the only ones who've seen the tower.
But he asked the impossible. I need more men.
Then perhaps you can tell him when he arrives.
Hiding it inside the shaft would have to come out of the armor thickness. And what good is a vault with flimsy walls?
I think I got it. I got it!
Luckily, it's trivial to fix this whole mess. Change the part of the Death Star that crashes on the moon. Switch the equatorial edge of the dish for the polar edge. This way, the throne room belongs, and you have a reason to use another bit of concept art, the flooded turbo laser turrets. The secret vault can be brought into line with Star Wars without deviating from what they intended. This vault is described as accessed through the throne room, and that's all. To hide the vault, it needs to be under the surface of the Death Star's North Pole. To access the vault, use a concealed turbolift that runs beside the main lift shafts, and only stops at the vault and throne room. There are so very many possibilities here for all sorts of water-based spectacular sequences. Should the throne room be flooded? Maybe, maybe not, but the vault definitely should be. This underwater art looks great, and it's got metaphorical depth too. Luke Skywalker grew up on a moisture farm. Vaporators condense airborne water from an expanse of desert air. Tatooine has dune seas, but no oceans of surface water. The planet not Tatooine, I mean Jakku, looks exactly the same. This means that both Luke and Rey should have a tremendous reaction the first time they see an ocean of water. For anything involving sailing or swimming, the desert worlders should be fish out of water. You can get so much emotion from that, while ringing true as a genuine part of these two characters. Maybe J.J. Abrams didn't want to remind anyone about Jar Jar and the Gungans, so everything underwater was removed. Shame, there was a lot of potential to this wreck location. We're getting quite near the end of the movie. It's about time we had another JJ invention. JJ kills Han Solo in the first movie he makes. That happens right next to the Mega Death Star. Then, JJ brings him back from the dead. After the worst saber duel since 1977, Kylo starts daydreaming. He imagines that, if he hadn't killed his father, they might get on well. This is meant to absolve the character of his previous actions. Rey goes to sulk on an island, the way Jake taught her to solve her problems. After this, the real problems in the movie will start. She is on this island to gain upgrades. We are to believe Leia's lightsaber has been here all along, and yet I bet Carrie Fisher never once laid eyes on this prop. Of all the nonsensical things in this movie, one is particularly unnecessary. The entire Star Destroyer fleet launching is based on a terrible idea.
Then we won't use that tower. Switch over the source of navigation signal to this ship. We'll guide the fleet out ourselves.
Someone on the project realizes something doesn't seem right about launching such large ships this way, through rock and atmosphere, when the entire planet is already both hidden and uncharted. A limitation is put in. Not about Star Destroyers in atmosphere. No, for some reason Poe tells us that large ships can't find their way up.
They can't activate their shields until they leave atmosphere.
Which isn't easy on Exegol. Ships that size need help taking off. Nav can't tell which way's up out there.
Not that these ships are built without repulsor lifts. That would mean you need to raise them individually on a ferry ship. This is not what they go with. No, Poe declares that in principle, a large ship may not possess a certain device.
Nav can't tell which way's up out there.
So how do the ships take off?
They use a signal from a navigation tower like this one.
On Earth, there is a device called an artificial horizon. This little machine has one function. It tells you which way up and down are. Yet Sheev doesn't have any. This isn't just a failure in ship design. Poe tells us that no ship could possibly tell which way up is, unless the ship was slightly smaller than the ones Sheev built.
Ships that size, ships that size, ships that size, ships that size need help taking off.
If this is a problem for large ships, why wouldn't Sheev build smaller ones? Something like a TIE fighter or a Lambda shuttle. Anything at all would do. The reason is that nobody thought about this. The can't tell which way is up idea was a desperation move. This finale doesn't work, but the movie needs it to. It requires a single point of failure for the fleet, something our heroes can drop bombs on.
Except they won't. Air team's gonna find the tower, ground team's gonna blast it.
It might be possible to fix this can't find the way up issue. That isn't the point though. This problem exists as a symptom of a deeper rot. The entire ending is structurally unsound. A fix to this misses the point. The problem never needed to exist. A better ending to the movie would sidestep the whole issue.
I'm sorry.
Before we can think about a decent ending, we have to see what JJ made. It had to be complex and elaborate, with many twists. A little earlier, a house of cards is set up as the foundation to a visual spectacle.
They've landed a troop carrier.
Jam the speeders.
I can't, sir.
Why not?
That's not how speeders work. This is a reference to the speeder bikes on Endor. After getting into a bike chase, Luke suggests jamming.
Quick, jam their comlink, center switch!
The rebels don't want the scout troopers to phone home. Leia is told to jam their comlinks. This has nothing to do with jamming speeders, whatever that is. This line is based on walkie-talkie mechanics. The speeder bikes were not built with a switch to jam their own repulsors. Luke's technical expertise lets him disrupt their comms. It works for the same reason you need to say over. As long as you hold down the transmit key on a walkie-talkie, you are jamming. If you capture an enemy comlink, you can tape down the button. For example, if you have one of their speeder bikes. There are ways to get around this with Earth tech, so arguably it shouldn't work. It should be possible to change comlink frequencies. Scout Trooper helmets should have their own radios. Still, it makes sense. Comlink jamming is based on real limitations. Mutating that to jam their speeders is a baffling mistake. It's not the only issue in this part of the movie. Perhaps jam is meant to replicate tire countermeasures. The Star Destroyer has the equivalent of spike strips on the hull. This is the least interesting way to do that. It would have been better to invent something. The line becomes, "Sir, they're jumping over our energy caltrops." A cool new weapon, and one the horses can evade. There are 3 distinct problems JJ is grappling with. Second things first, the Star Destroyers. In a wet navy, destroyers are the smallest ships worth mentioning, and may not even be classed as capital ships. In a space navy, destroyers are a larger class of capital ship than frigates. Star Destroyers are built in orbital shipyards, and if they enter the atmosphere, that's the same event as being destroyed, just a minute or two before the end. I think the source of this confusion is Attack of the Clones, which shows the ancestors of Star Destroyers, Acclamator-class troop transport and landing ships. Acclamators are equipped with landing gear and ramps down from their doors. Their sole purpose? To deliver clone troopers to a planet's surface. But they aren't dedicated warships, they're only ancestors to the Star Destroyer. There are also the Victory class, which are much smaller than Imperial class Star Destroyers, and as such they can descend below orbit without being guaranteeably written off. Obviously JJ would never settle for something smaller than the design of the OT, so that's not what he's going for. With the fleet of a zillion super laser Star Destroyers versus a squillion assorted freighters, the intention could never be the small ones. If JJ had thought for a second about building this fleet, it would have had to be in orbit. There. Now the fleet is enough to blockade the whole planet. You don't need the magical compass and the red matter. Third, in order to make the zillion ISDs go away, JJ declares that shields don't work in atmosphere. He is not correct about this. Finally, first of all, the intention with the horses is to show hippies beating robots through nature, or some such thing.
Not bad for one lesson! You had a good teacher!
This could actually work, surprisingly enough, because there is exactly one scenario where a cavalry charge makes sense. There is one technology that has a vulnerability for the horses to exploit, and one place where that can happen. To justify the horses, you must have shields in atmosphere. Shields can block energy weapons and are a barrier to all repulsor craft, anything using hover technology. What can pass right through shields? Walkers, wheeled vehicles, infantry, and tracked vehicles. Anything in contact with the ground can get through easily, like horses for example. This has been established as the way it works since Empire Strikes Back, and reiterated in Phantom Menace. If you look carefully, you may notice how the horses aren't wearing spacesuits. If the Star Destroyer had been a little higher in the air, Horsies would pass out. If the whole fleet was in orbit, where it belonged, there could be no cavalry on deck. Some have suggested rotating the Star Destroyer. Either pitch or roll could send the horses skittering off the edge. Let's have a look at how that would work. Artificial gravity ought to leave the crew unhindered by a roll. One of the challenges with artificial gravity is distance. So, you want 1g of gravity inside your ship? How deep, exactly, do you think Earth's gravity well is? The moon orbits hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. That's a lot of gravity, a long way off. One of the challenges with artificial gravity is distance. Gravity is gravity.
You did it!
If you have 1g inside the Falcon, logically it would have an Earth-sized gravity well. Even if it makes a vertical column or cone above the deck area, that's enormous. Maybe that's not how it works in the Star Wars universe. It certainly doesn't sound right. When we see a fleet of ships, none of them are careful to avoid these invisible columns of gravity. Again, this is something we can prove. In the very first movie, we see TIE fighters attacking the Falcon. One looks like he's about to make an attack run over the top of the freighter. Another one clearly flies over the top. While I like the idea that the TIE fighter is specialized for only space, it's disproven. Flying through the skies of Bespin, in the Lando system, there are ordinary TIEs. Maybe its repulsor lift system can compensate, but far more likely, artificial gravity does not leak through the hull. That means if you roll the Star Destroyer, the horses will fall off. That would be one way to remove the boarding party. How are these Star Destroyers floating? Presumably, this model of Star Destroyer has heavy-duty repulsor lifts installed, but wouldn't you imagine they're at the bottom? Do you think Jabba's sail barge can float upside down? The desert skiffs clearly have repulsors along the bottom or ends. The sail barge would work the same way. So would Luke's land speeder. Seems like it might be dangerous rolling your repulsors away from the planet. Here's another option. Just have the other Star Destroyers open fire. These are meant to be warships, right? Surely it has enough armor to withstand a few dozen hits from its fellow destroyers. If not the heaviest turbo lasers, then use the lighter guns. A light bombardment should clear the ruffians off the hull.
Use ion cannons.
No, definitely not with ion cannons. That would disable the Star Destroyer. You want to hit the horses with blaster cannons. Believe it or not, walking around on the surface of a ship is one of the better ideas. There are problems with it, but it is physically possible. You could create that improbable scenario if you tried. The rest of this ending, well, that gets rather silly. The only times we see Rey and Kylo fighting, it is with each other. As we move swiftly toward the conclusion, Rey and Kylo decide now is the time not to have a fight. Would you believe that they decide to fight other people instead? I guess that this is one of the downsides to erasing the Jedi Order at the beginning of your trilogy. If you want a lightsaber fight, it has to be between the only two people with lightsabers. Because Kylo is a goodie now, that is right out. This entire fiasco is an excuse to employ Disney's teleportation magic. This time it isn't for pathfinding, it is for drama. Let's return to Kylo and let this play out. Now, Kylo crosses the border into the planet Mexico. He was flying a TIE fighter, so clearly faster than an X-Wing. Rey was flying Luke's old T-65, and that TIE might be equally old. What effect does this have? There's no sign of a TIE pilot's suit. Using a fighter that's several decades out of date has no impact on them. Not so much as a line about taking the shortest flight path. Having discarded his saber, Kylo is unarmed. Except no, not really. He has a blaster pistol of some kind. If we can forgive him finding a TIE fighter, the blaster must be from the same place. I could imagine a pistol or carbine stashed inside a standard TIE. It's okay for him to have this. Then, for no reason at all, his only weapon vanishes between scenes. Blasters take two ammunition types. To actually deal damage, energy is stored in power cells. For the blaster to function, it also uses a small amount of Tabana gas per shot. It would be fine to say the pistol has run out of either ammo type. It needs both. Perhaps a Matrix reference, with Kylo carrying many blasters and dropping the expended ones instead of reloading.
Would you please remove any metallic items you're carrying? Keys, loose change? Holy shit!
Or he could fire a bunch of shots before expending the last of his supplies.
We're out of rockets, sir.
In JJ's movie, Kylo does not drop the weapon after it clicks empty. There's no shot of him discarding it. He doesn't even throw it at an enemy. These fellows appear. The Knights of Ren. These are like Vader's bounty hunters, if they were all in the same uniform. These guys are copycats, imitating a guy who wishes he was as cool as Vader. Not exactly interesting, are they? Being mysterious is not as impressive as these chaps think. It would be reasonable to drop your blaster when your enemy is a Jedi. What are the chances that you'll get a shot past that saber? However, there's no indication in the movie that they're force sensitive. They also don't have lightsabers, or much armor. They'll just be wearing armor weave. The weapons are even worse. These appear to just be clubs and blades. One of them glows red in the dark. There's no indication any of them would be able to stand up to a lightsaber, if only Kylo still had one. There aren't any Jedi for the Knights to hunt. That's a foundational principle of the reboot universe. No Jedi. Seems like a rather bad idea to throw the lightsaber away, wouldn't you say? Really, he should have been able to take out 2 of them with his blaster. After the first one is down, he can telegrab that guy's weapon. A gaffy stick is better than nothing. Speaking of Tusken Raiders, they're a good point of comparison. Their gaffy sticks use simple metal blades. In contrast, Gamorrean guards use vibro axes. The vibroblade is somewhere between chainsword and power sword. The axes are meant to look like classic weapons, but are far more deadly. Inside the axe head is an ultrasonic vibration generator at thousands of hertz. This enhances the cutting ability of the blade. These Knights of Ren? I think that's just a lump of metal. JJ thinks it looks cool. Kylo fights Ren. Kylo loses. Not sure why he was having so much trouble. It's not like he force uploaded his skills to them as well. When he gets a force Skype call, it gets even worse. Being teleported a lightsaber, he is pleased. Kylo does a little curtsy. Then he attacks with the saber. After a round or 2 of combat, Kylo deploys his special move. So far, he has been a little heavy on the twirling. Besides that, he's actually decent with a saber. Maybe the problem is with Rey's actress rather than the choreography. Anyway, Kylo uses an ancient technique he has picked up in his extensive training. Kylo twirls the saber behind him, then he bends down. Kylo crouches, and Ren winds up for a heavy axe strike. Then the combat round ends. It is Ren's turn again, so he makes the attack he prepared for earlier. For some reason, this connects with the saber. Ren must have seen the guard position Kylo has been waiting in. Why does he aim for the saber? Kylo's guard doesn't actually protect much of him. His hand is level with his ribcage. The saber blade doesn't start until his shoulder blades. More than half his torso is open for attack. Not to mention the arm itself. This is a strange moment in a strange movie, but it gets stranger. Maybe this is a move that he's practiced with these Renites, and they know exactly where to swing. He's never in danger because these chaps are such good friends. After the obliging buddy swings at his blade, Kylo puffs out his cheeks. This isn't an accident. It's not as if this was the only take, so they had to leave it in. Most likely, someone told him to do this. Maybe this was in the script, or it was decided while filming. If this wasn't supposed to be in there, someone would have noticed during editing. I hope this choice had the desired effect on someone, because I don't get it. Is he supposed to be a little puffed, out of breath? I don't think we've ever seen a Jedi do this in combat. It's a Disney first. To me, this does not effectively convey fatigue from fighting in a new way. With a new force alignment, he has no dark side energy to sustain him. That doesn't come across at all. Maybe it's to make us think that one strike was particularly heavy. If that were the case, maybe his wrist is sore from the force being concentrated on it. Nope, we don't see that. Was this a dangerous move that Kylo regrets? Did he only just realize if the axe had hit harder, it might have moved his saber blade? He certainly moves it away again afterwards. Again though, I don't see any evidence that this is the case. It isn't treated as a particularly heavy strike. There's no sense that this one attack needs to be blocked in a different way. It's a bizarre choice from any perspective. Speaking of odd choices, Kylo gets one last moment of comedy.
As once I fell, so falls the last Skywalker.
Apparently, our man Sheev was rather upset about his own death. I can see why he might hold a grudge. I think we all know why this line really exists, though. It's a reference. This whole movie, nay, this reboot universe, is based on references, copying the shape of what went before. There are ships that look like TIEs and ones that look like X-Wings. There are mimics for stormtroopers and star destroyers. The most clever technique Disney has is a reference, copying something to make you remember better movies. Well, I remember. I was there when these better movies were all that existed. Kylo joins Rey, now with an appropriately coloured lightsaber. The pair draw their swords and face him. Are they planning to fight Sheev? Sheev doesn't have a lightsaber. That can't be what is happening. This ending is no good. It isn't nearly close to good. It has few of its own ideas, and those are some of the worst aspects. Finally, the designated hero enters the boss arena. How does the Space Pope greet the one who came to kill him?
I never wanted you dead.
I never wanted you dead? Clearly, this is not true. Disney's Palpatine survived the explosion of the second Death Star. He flew across the galaxy without a ship or suit. He only lost a few fingertips in that whole process. Zombie Pelpo pops up in this movie for the first time, so let's call him Sheev. The real one can just be Palpatine. Sheev has given one command: to kill someone he doesn't want dead.
It will be yours if you do as I ask. Kill the girl.
Now, I'm not convinced this edgy teenager has the power level to defeat a Mary Sue. One could argue that the Skeleton King has read Kylo's mind.
I have been inside your head.
Sheev knows that the kid won't be able to cause any harm to her, because Kylo is just that incompetent. He knows the kid will try to kill Rey, fail, and betray him. They will seek out the Lich Emperor Sheev, and this is his plan too.
Send a ship to a world they know. Let it burn. She will come, her friends will follow.
When the two try to kill Sheev, they're forced to visit him. This does not sound like a master plan. In the original trilogy, this is not how Emperor Palpatine behaves. In his first appearance, he is concerned.
We have a new enemy. He could destroy us.
There is a threat to Imperial power. In the attempt to gain a mighty ally, the Emperor calls off the execution.
The son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi.
He will join us or die, Master.
This turns out to be a bad idea, as Luke evades capture. Then in the next movie, the Emperor reveals his scheme.
He will seek you out, and when he does, you must bring him before me. Only together can we turn him to the dark side of the Force.
He will come to me.
He will come to you, and then you will bring him before me.
With the Skywalker relation revealed, he has foreseen the outcome. At some point, Luke would confront his father. Luke doesn't want to talk to the Emperor.
Soon I'll be dead, and you with me.
Luke wants to redeem his father and blow up another Death Star. His skills are not best applied by jumping in an X-Wing and firing torpedoes.
Right now I feel I can take on the whole Empire myself.
He is more use aboard Shuttle Tidarium to handle the shield. Vader is the bait, and an essential part of the plan.
Only together.
Palpatine knows that he can win against the young Jedi. He is not strong enough to ensnare Luke long enough to turn him. For that, Vader is needed.
Rise, my friend.
The Emperor addresses him as my friend and Lord Vader.
You've done well, Lord Vader.
This alludes to the decades of history these characters have. By treating Vader with respect, every character is enhanced.
Your work here is finished, my friend.
How great and terrible is Lord Vader? His master must be more powerful than that.
What of the reports of the rebel fleet massing near Sullust?
It is of no concern.
When Luke enters the equation, he must also be mighty. The two most powerful people in the universe fear meeting him one-on-one. Almost none of this is present in JJ's movie. Rey has no real desire to see the Emperor, like Luke. In the OT, he wants Luke alive, so he orders him brought to the throne room.
He is your master now.
In JJ's movie, he wants Rey in the throne room, so he orders her execution. Vader is a loyal, capable servant carrying out those orders. Kylo is both incompetent and a serial traitor. Really, there needed to be a new apprentice Sith. Doesn't need to be anything special, it can be like Darth Maul. He mostly just stands there and looks mean. But even though he dies the second time he crosses blades with a Jedi, he is a capable warrior. That can't be Kylo. It's too late for that to be credible. The plan in the OT is to attempt to turn Luke to the dark side. If that fails, then the Sith intend to kill him.
Can it be done? He will join us or die.
The Emperor doesn't mind if Vader dies, and one Skywalker is replaced with another.
Take your father's place at my side.
The one thing Palpatine doesn't want is for any harm to come to himself. With his frail appearance and walking stick, the Emperor seems defenseless. In fact, he has two layers of defenses. The first is clear. Luke attacks, and Vader blocks. The loyal servant protects his master. We in the audience also know about Force lightning. No! If he was in real danger, the Emperor could blast Luke across the room. JJ's plan is confusing.
You want to kill me? That is what I want.
Why is it that Disney loves
self-termination
so much? First it was Jake Skywalker, now Sheev Palpatine. A curious pattern. I think JJ fixated on the line, "Strike me down with all of your hatred." From this, he spins his various mistakes. They focus on trying to find a loophole. JJ thinks the Emperor had the right idea.
You want this? I am defenseless.
JJ believes you defeat an evil politician by hitting him with a sword. The only problem is how George Lucas ruined Star Wars with all this Force stuff. Apparently, smiting your enemies is evil, so we need to game the system.
Then name the system.
What if you strike without hatred?
I grow tired of asking this, so it'll be the last time.
Maybe the way the Force works, it's got a loophole.
All you want is for me to hate, but I won't.
As long as you stab in a pious manner, it doesn't count as the dark side. Feel free to go berserk, just do it with good intentions. JJ is vaguely aware the Jedi are associated with peace and justice. He just can't work that into a story. Accordingly, he tries to minimize the impact. JJ turns to ancient computer games to study the design of boss fights. He discovers a popular approach is reflecting the boss's attacks back into it. Perfect, JJ says to himself, having filled his research quota for the decade. Rey won't strike, she'll parry the attack and hit Sheev's weak point. He doesn't have any giant glowing eyeballs, the sneaky so-and-so.
I will deal with you later.
Maybe the robot arm he's attached to has a thermal exhaust port. The important thing is that Rey makes no kind of aggressive gesture, no attack. Oh, well, that pulse of lightning she sent in his direction was, like, penitent lightning.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense. Never attack.
Now, we do have to deal with a different aspect of the fight, specifically the reincarnation. Turns out the "strike me down" line is older than the Emperor. First, Obi-Wan gives a warning that he knows will be ignored.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
He alludes to his Force Ghost form, which is displayed moments later. Okay, it's not displayed because you don't see him until Episode 5. Luke acts on advice from the late Kenobi twice. First, his robes have barely fallen to the floor before he deals timely advice.
Run, Luke, run!
Fly, you fools. Later, his guidance is responsible for Luke's accuracy in the trench run.
Luke, trust me.
The prequels add more lore regarding Force Ghosts, but it's not necessary to discuss that yet. Force Ghosts have always been a light side ability. Based on "than you can possibly imagine," Palpatine cannot become one. Yet as soon as Anakin was salvaged from within Vader, he became a ghost. I suggest that's not because it's a lost art. Force Ghosts are incompatible with being committed to the dark side. Whatever immortality they have, it must be inferior. Even if only in our eyes. If a Sith Lord needed 100 Force-sensitive sacrifices per day, he might be content. Some of us would consider that a trifle monstrous, as being lesser than a Force Ghost, but you can understand why the guy doing it might not see things your way. Back to JJ's movie. Sheev has come up with Sith reincarnation.
Kill me, and my spirit will pass into you, as all the Sith live in me.
Despite making no real effort to turn her, Sheev asks Rey to help him. Some coercion is applied, but I really think JJ would have forgotten this, except that it was in Episode 6, so it was copied into this movie. Would Sheev be happy with possessing Rey? Yes, he would. In the EU, Palpatine has many clones. At one point, he even threatens to possess Leia's unborn child. However, this isn't truly about what Sheev wants. It's about what JJ wants. Both JJ and RJ decided the galaxy had no Jedi in it. On the surface, this is part of a reset to the status quo. At the start of the original movie, the Jedi are all but extinct.
The Jedi are extinct. Their fire has gone out of the universe.
Therefore, that's the situation of the reboot trilogy. There's more to say on that, but it belongs to the movies in question. For now, it'll be close enough. There are consequences to that decision. In the prequels, there was an entire Jedi temple. Fans can recite the names of every member of the Jedi Council. We can identify them with nothing more than a good look at their lightsaber hilts. Disney has none of them. The trilogy could have had only 2 lightsabers ever, but they added a few more. 3 more sabers were shown, doubling the total number. Sure, you can make an action figure for that one time the Stormtrooper held the Graflex. But there aren't any cool new Jedi. There aren't any Jedi apprentices. They don't even have a green saber, except for the flashback to Jake the Ripper. That seems suboptimal to me, but I wasn't consulted. I'm just here to examine what they called a finished product. To compensate for the lack of Jedi, Disney decided to invoke their names. That will fix everything. Praise be to Kathleen. First, they put a foreshadowing scene right at the start.
Be with me. They're not with me. Ugh.
Then, they take a list of previous actors and start negotiating. How much for 5 minutes of your time? We're looking to pay you voice acting rates instead of acting ones. This also solves another problem. I believe the initial reboot was based on anti-prequel sentiment.
Now get out of here. No, Mrs. Stay!
Disney believed that they needed to make up for the prequels. The wider audience must be put off by the depth of the lore. Given that everyone hates the prequels, Disney should ignore them. Except a lot of people like the prequel era, so the official position is they remain in the reboot.
Hello, Dex.
Buddy!
The movies have intentionally avoided prequel things, so far. Now, at the very end, they make all the references at once. With only one Force-sensitive left in the galaxy, Rey must represent all the Jedi. Now both of JJ's factions use reincarnation, just different variants of it.
Kill me, and my spirit will pass into you, as all the Sith live in me.
Every Jedi who ever lived lives in you.
This isn't really part of the world at all, which is a shame. A seance is the only thing we've ever seen the Mary Sue improve at. At 4 hours, a thing she can't do is invented.
They're not with me. Ugh.
Then at 6 hours, she does the thing.
Rey, bring back the balance, Rey, as I did. Dave used to con her into getting naked by saying that her clothes had ghosts in them.
Trouble is, I don't buy this as a real power for either of them. For one thing, if you strike me down now is a light side line.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
It's out of character for the Emperor to willingly take a wound like this.
I assure you, we are quite safe from your friends here.
On the opposite side, I don't believe in force hearing. Force healing to an extent, but not hearing. It isn't your decision when a forced ghost chooses to speak. They aren't constantly muttering. To explain why she would need effort, that's not to boost her signal reception. Force ghosts are light aligned.
An old friend has learned the path to immortality.
Imagine if there was any risk of Rey turning to the dark side of the Force. The Force ghosts might be trying to contact her, but she is too far gone. Their voices cannot reach that far down the dark path.
If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will.
Not far enough to reach Rey. The only ones who can help Rey would be herself and Kylo. All the meditating and training she's doing are attempts to outweigh the evil she's already done.
Give it to me.
Speaking of evil Rey, we're discussing the boss fight. In JJ's movie, she kills the guy who has mysteriously returned. The Emperor fell down a shaft, exploded, and then the station blew up. Rey uses her evil powers to shred his face. But that's only torture. It makes her feel better, but it doesn't help. How can you kill a god? What a grand and intoxicating innocence. Death is a minor inconvenience to Disney's Sheev. He has died before. What benefit is there to destroying his cloned body? He can just get a new one, you know, somehow. No matter if it's by saber or lightning, Rey can't credibly kill him. If she had been trained in the dark side, that would be fine. I could imagine a Sith technique to cause final death to your foes. But as we all know, Rey has done no significant training in anything.
Untrained but stronger than she knows.
I don't think it makes sense for Rey to confront Sheev. At most, you could say she has been manipulated. Sheev knows that the only bit of character the Mary Sue has is her orphan status.
My parents. Please.
Fatty? Adopted fatty? Fatty, no parents?
Rey would like some parents, and if she's a secret princess, then all the better. Naturally, Sheev exploits this. But the original is better than the copy. Luke was there to redeem his father.
I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully. That was why you couldn't destroy me. That's why you won't bring me to your Emperor now.
Rey doesn't have that motivation. She wants to kill Sheev because that's like Star Wars. If the Skywalkers fought the Emperor, she'll imitate them. I don't think this makes sense. No, there's no reason to visit Sheev's throne room. The best option is to handle the movie's finale differently. Remember, in the reboot universe, they can communicate via Force Skype.
I'll come tell you.
Rey, Kylo, and Sheev can all join a group call. They could be scattered across the whole galaxy and talk as if they were in the same room. With the attachment teleport feature, they can pass sabers around. Honestly, I don't know why they bothered to meet in person. One option is consistent with the universe JJ and RJ have established.
Can you see my surroundings?
You're gonna pay for what you did.
I can't see yours.
The other is a copy of how the original trilogy ended. I suppose that gives us the answer. Duplicating the OT for nostalgia is more important to them.
This is a ship that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs.
12!
Still, with how many objects are teleported, it's confusing. Most of the movie uses Force Skype, except at the end that power is forgotten. I think the movie should end differently. Here's what we do. Remember how JJ blew up a planet earlier? I know, it's not very memorable, but he did. The 16-hour countdown has not been honored. A planet was destroyed earlier than Sheev promised. This is a strange thing to happen, and you could say it's because of the director. JJ just loves to destroy planets, and it's been a whole movie since his last one. He sends a Death Star destroyer out alone.
Send a ship to a world they know.
This is not sound military strategy. One Imperial Star Destroyer is enough to intimidate a planet. One Disney Star Destroyer, that's a sitting duck, a Donald Duck. A bunch of non-military craft are able to destroy an absurdly large fleet. What chance would a lone ship have against such opposition? Here's what we do. Sheev sends a ship to destroy the planet of Kombucha. Maybe it was under the command of Kylo, maybe not. Either way, destroying the planet wasn't planned. Sheev was scrambling to get rid of Rey, and heard she was on that world. His original plan was to wait for the 16 hours. This will be Sheev's undoing. Blowing up the planet Komochi galvanizes an indifferent galaxy. Suddenly, there are a lot of angry people who have a will to stand up to Sheev. This sacrifices one of JJ's surprises. He wants these people to come out of nowhere. If you see the galactic populace fighting back on a small scale, you'll expect it. How can JJ subvert your expectations when you can figure out what's going on? The Rebel Alliance? Wait, no. This is the reboot. They renamed their duplicate factions. The Resistance has a plan. A curious pattern of ships is gathered. Some freighters, shuttles, starfighters, and a carrier. These are packed to the gills with armed volunteers. The carrier drops out of hyperspace next to the Death Star destroyer. All the X-Wings that jumped with the carrier break off to engage. The carrier sets a collision course. Sublight engine throttles to full thrust. Every ion cannon the Resistance has is brought to bear. The convenient thing about ion cannons is they penetrate shields, and don't cause physical damage. The Resistance has modified many of these ion cannons. Their firing cycle is set well into overdrive. Not one of them can run for 10 shots without a component burning out, but when they break, they are very easy to fix. There are piles of spare parts and lockers next to each cannon. Under this covering fire, all the shuttles are launched. The Star Destroyer is partially disabled, and is being boarded. Each shuttle and freighter docks inside the hangar of the Star Destroyer. After a minute, it turns back to the carrier, ready to bring over more volunteer troops. Sheev has made a critical error, and now his ship has been captured. This changes the finale of the movie. Now this captured Star Destroyer, renamed Briar Patch, leads the Resistance fleet. They venture forward into the unknown regions, with Rey on the bridge. There is no need for a mysterious red cloud, so that isn't a factor. The fleet arrives in orbit of the planet Mexico. Rey rings up Sheev. He pretends to be busy, but accepts the call after a few seconds. Our hero hurls threats and insults at the politician. From the background, Mr. Poe makes a few comments about Sheev's mother. It's all very inspiring. Sheev is pleading for his life, making promises.
Oh, I'm afraid.
Oh no, please don't fire your Briar Patch cannon at me. Anything but that. I am defenseless. My fleet is still being built underground. Spare me, and you can be co-emperor of the galaxy. Rey stands at the controls of the main super laser cannon. She aims at the only ship in orbit around Mexico. There is a First Order Star Destroyer left by Kylo to guard Sheev. Our heroes have a brief discussion, and decide it's too dangerous to let Sheev live. It's a shame that the planet Mexico is full of Mexicans, but sacrifices have to be made. Besides, the crews for these Star Destroyers must come from somewhere. This is a Sith planet. It's heroic to destroy this one. Sheev smiles. Maybe he didn't make such a mistake after all. Deep inside a hidden compartment, there is a Sith relic. It works something like a power cell for Force energy. Creating the clone body for Sheev had nearly drained it. Its name is the Maledicticron. Finn has discovered this aboard the captured Star Destroyer. He sprints onto the bridge, out of breath. He tries to warn them of an evil thing he saw. This is Finn we're talking about, the funny comic relief man. Nobody takes him seriously. Rey yanks back the firing lever. The enemy Star Destroyer vanishes in an instant, and Rey smirks. She has never felt so good. This is what real power looks like. "You're next, Sheev," she yells over Force Skype. Finn still fails to get her attention. The super laser will recharge in a few minutes, and she wants to be there. Only C-3PO has any interest, and it's clear he wanted the excuse to leave the bridge. Look at the cowardly Tin Man. Laugh at him.
Oh, wait for me!
When Finn first found the device, it was inactive. Now the Maledicticron has glowing red runes all over it. A progress bar is slightly filled, and Finn feels uneasy. 3PO has turned around and is shuffling back to the bridge at top speed. He keeps babbling about how there's something he mustn't tell Rey at once. Finn follows 3PO back. He asks questions. 3PO only answers that he isn't allowed to describe the device. He is forbidden, he says, from revealing what that accursed machine does with the life force of the dead. Finn has heard enough and picks up 3PO.
I got it.
Carrying him like a battering ram, the ex-stormtrooper sprints to the bridge. When they arrive, 3PO declares that Rey should not destroy the planet. He refuses to elaborate.
Because of the red arm.
Rey scoffs, and Finn thinks for a moment he can see a dark red aura around her. "There's a fiendish thingy doing evil glowy stuff," he says, eloquently. Seeing Rey is not convinced, Finn continues. "It wasn't glowing until you wiped out that Star Destroyer. It feeds on your anger, and on everyone you kill." Since Rey never hung up the Force Skype call, Sheev overhears. Now he unveils his true plan. The size of his invasion fleet is no accident. The crew of those ships are all walking sacrifices. If his fleet is destroyed, their deaths will charge the Sith device. If the planet Mexico is destroyed, the Maledicticron will charge that way. If the Resistance is destroyed, even better. Either way, Sheev wins. Rey is furious. Sheev is doubled over with laughter. His plan is flawless. There is no possible outcome where the opposing force defeats him. Then, at the darkest minute of the darkest hour, a memory breaks in.
Master Skywalker.
Something reminds Rey of an old mentor.
What are you doing?
This is a difficult position for Rey. She can't see any way to win. Whenever JJ sets an obstacle for her, he grants her strength.
How did you do that?
I don't know. Are you offering me a job?
The reason she faces obstacles is so we can watch how effortlessly she defeats them.
What are you most afraid of?
Myself.
Not this time. Somehow, Sheev has turned her power against her. He has created a situation where it doesn't matter how mighty she is. Sheev now counts on her talent for mayhem.
Every death was a sacrifice toward my release. And I must say, your contributions were many and magnificent.
He knows she can kill countless numbers of his minions, except Sheev bothered to count them anyway. If Rey has any amount of success, the Maledicticron will corrupt her. Unlike the Skywalkers, the Scavenger Girl has no Jedi training. By unleashing so much dark energy, she will instinctively absorb it.
With each passing moment, you make yourself more my servant.
There is no need for reincarnation. She will walk the dark path willingly. It is unavoidable. The harder she struggles, the more she will call upon a dark strength. Rey gets a hold of herself, recites an off-brand litany against fear or something. With her fist still on the super laser trigger, Rey meditates. She is completely directionless. As far as she can see, there is no way to achieve victory. She calls out through the Force for guidance. 2 voices answer.
Rey.
The first is Leia. She just died earlier in this movie. It's timely. She says one line Disney had footage of Carrie Fisher saying.
And I need to talk to him. That was incredibly brave what you did, renouncing the First Order, saving this man's life.
It doesn't make much sense in context, but we don't care. We know Leia would try to help if she was able to. She is never heard from again. Almost as quickly, Leia's father's voice follows. The voice of Anakin Skywalker is confident, convincing. He gives her loving advice that makes perfect sense. Only, for most of his life, he was Darth Vader. Doesn't that voice sound a lot like Vader? In fact, this voice is Sheev. Now she doesn't even know who to trust. The next voice is Yoda. He is nowhere near as helpful as Sheev Vader was. Yoda keeps saying things like, at peace, calm, passive. Rey indignantly points out that they're at war. Yoda replies, war's not to make one great. Already know you that which you require. And then he too is gone. Mace L. Windu says that you can't trust anyone. Betrayal can come from the most unexpected people. Has a bit of a grudge against Anakin. Says she probably shouldn't trust the voices in her head. Or the villain, come to think of it. Don't trust him either. Ahsoka Tiko suggests thinking of your enemies as droids. She recites her iconic line from the show, golly, I sure do love killing droids. Obi-Wan Kenobi chimes in now. Hello there, he says. That's not very helpful, Rey replies. Obi-Wan apologizes. He says the recording studio staff insisted on that line. He continues on to say that Sheev is a politician, and you can't trust any of those. You can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting. Finally, Luke offers a ghostly pat on the head. You're all right, kid, he says. You know what you're doing. Move Zig. He advises her to think outside the box. Rey feels enlightened. When she snaps back to reality, she looks down at her hand. The trigger of the super laser is firmly in the off position. Rey smiles, but not the grim snarl of before. She reaches underneath the control panel and disconnects the trigger lever. When she turns back to the bridge, a new hologram is talking. Somehow, Holdo returned. She is monitoring the progress bar on the Maledicticron. It has just reached 20% of full strength. Rey serenely answers that it doesn't matter. Sheev will not triumph today. Rey walks across the bridge to the comms station. Somehow, Uhura is here. The first casualties are being reported now. Rey asks to address the entire Resistance fleet. Bravely, she orders a full retreat. Sheev will not get his sacrifices today. The planet Mexico will not be annihilated. That's how the final confrontation ends. Our heroes leave the villain, confident that he can be defeated in time. There is no need for a grand army if every light freighter is a warship. Together, the citizens of the galaxy can hold off any invasion fleet. All it requires is for every ship to carry arms and armor.
Yes! Free! And know I will soon come to claim you all.
Then come and find your judgment waiting. You have escaped captivity, only to face annihilation. I know you now.
This is an unexpected ending. One might even call it a subversion, with all that word implies. It's a strange kind of hopeful, and most importantly, it creates an interesting era afterward. As it is, nobody wants to tell stories after JJ and TLJ. If you leave Sheev, then stormtroopers and star destroyers can attack. You can have all the Imperial war machines you like, and even have the scheming mastermind behind them. This is kind of what JJ wanted to set up. Emperor, stormtroopers, ISDs, TIEs, all sorts of stories would now be possible. It could even lead into a whole new trilogy. Try a new set of heroes, a trilogy with any planning. You can just skip 80 years and imply Rey finally got some training. A lot of things are possible if you apply the slightest bit of creativity. This part is the most baffling of all. I could understand all the other failures of planning, writing a disjointed trilogy with nobody around as a Star Wars expert. I was sure the company would have certain priorities, that after their movies were over, it would be in a certain condition, one where all stories are possible, somehow. The most important would be the population of Jedi. In order to constantly pull new characters from nowhere, Jedi would be plentiful. In order to set them up with predetermined traits, there would be many temples. Each one has a different philosophy and a few distinctive mannerisms. Maybe these guys only use pink lightsaber blades. New temples and factions would be released every year or few. The other most important thing is finding a bottomless source of bad guys. Part of this can be handled by making Force sensitives more common, so more slip by. Some become above average at whatever they do all day. Others turn to the dark side and get red lightsabers. These are the things I expected. All the movies would be driving toward this particular setting, no matter the cost to the trilogy itself. The sheer possibility of the time after, that would be more important to Disney. I was wrong. Just because I care about the setting doesn't mean they do. I doubt they ever looked at it like this. Perhaps they took for granted that a new bad guy can always appear. I would have set this trilogy after the majority of the old lore had finished, to have an era all of their own, where no one has written before. A blank slate, except with some useful presets. A pool of characters to draw from, to make it easier for future writers. It would be sensible to add some other factions. One could be a mini-empire that would use ties even if they were obsolete. They will make a dozen types of Star Destroyer before ever considering another shape. Other factions would have to include droids, and probably some insects or lizards. If they have blood in an unusual color, that's even more family-friendly. Might as well add a bunch of people who wish they were Mandalorians too. All their armor looks like Fett's, because they're copying it. These are the things I expected. Not a focus on specific new characters, but planning for the next 1,000 ones. Maybe even charting out all the future plot twists, so your writers can safely jump a decade or two into the future. I still wouldn't like it, but I would have understood why they made those choices. That just about wraps up this lore debugging session, but please stick around until the end. I once heard an anecdote. December 14th, 1972. Eugene Cernan takes a few steps and wipes some dust from his shoulders. He is about to return home from work. It's going to be a long bus ride home.
And as we leave the moon and Taurus Littrell, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return.
He re-enters the Apollo lunar module. Mr. Cernan is the last to climb aboard. We did not return. Cernan died in 2017. As he lay on his deathbed, he did so as the last man to have walked on the moon. Of the 12 men who ever achieved such a feat, 4 still live. The youngest are 87 years old. In a few years, no living human will be able to claim to have walked on another world. An ineffable tragedy. The last good Star Wars movie came out in 2005. If you were born after then, you were born into a world that has yet to produce a good Star Wars movie. This may be a greater tragedy, for very different reasons. While our proximity to Earth is a tragedy of passivity, the Star Wars tragedy is one of activity. Our species is demonstrably capable of great feats of exploration in both distance and imagination. Feats of great distance require entire civilizations to work towards a common goal. Feats of great imagination can be achieved by anyone. What does it say that the sequel trilogy was so punishingly bad? Everything. The system has broken. The gears have come loose and are careening through our cultural landscape. However, I don't think there is much of a chance that those alive today will leave the galaxy far, far away to rot.
You're my only hope.
Those born into the Disney era, that is another story. Disney's unholy empire controls the vast majority of media. A horrible threshold approaches. At what point does the Star Wars IP become so tainted that the next generation no longer cares enough to investigate its rich history? Feats of great distance first require feats of great imagination. We watched a video recently. An internet YouTubey man was attempting to defend Disney's decision to decanonize the expanded universe. I am not a fan of the Disney stuff, he assured us, but it would be so very difficult to write without contradicting some forgotten silly comic from the 80s. Some colonial nobody once said,
"Why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept."
I don't remember who that man is. I don't reckon it is worth making the effort to factor in who he is. I just like the look of him and how his words feel. They kind of fit into this script, right? Maybe they make you feel something. Either way, I know a lot of people will feel something. That is why I resurrected the Nobody Man for this video. His name is Can't Be Asked. He was some pig farmer from Indonesia. He's a VTuber in his spare time. You may have a problem with this analogy, and that's history bred losers. Of course getting history right matters. Does it? Why? Because it is important to have an accurate cultural record, so we can move forward collectively and learn from the past? Because the ideology of the person doing the fixing will infuse the changes? Obviously, you say. It's very different. Scoff. Law is history. You can't unpublish something.
I am truly ashamed to have this actually called literature. Ooh, this is gonna be so delightful.
You generally shouldn't unpublish something. Most people know that burning a book is bad. Tearing a couple of pages out, adding in a new page, scribbling a few willies in it, that is totally fine. Maybe you like the new ripped-up post-it note and willied-up book better because you think that dude looks better with a willy on his cheek. You like the new page with the Joss Whedon cameo. Cool.
Don't do that again.
What you should have done is written your own book. A literary universe is a really neat end product.
I should very much like to meet this Jango Fett.
But it is also a constraint. To add to the canon of a universe is to shoulder the burden of integration. It is an all-or-nothing affair. You are either writing around an existing universe, or you are writing a new one. Marvel does some alt timeline buggery when they can't be asked writing with maximum constraints. This is still a new universe, and it is a respectable course of action. It is stated to not affect primary continuity. I can almost hear your thoughts. You're thinking, but an author has a right to change their work. Sure, you can make that argument, but apply that silly reasoning to history book authors too. Culture is history. I get that it doesn't feel like that when you're living in the middle of any given period in history, but it's the truth.
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
For history books, a new edition may be released. The old edition is preserved and is essential and valuable in its own right, if only as a history of history itself. Older editions are archived with great care, as they still have enormous cultural and informational value. They may even stay in print. Not so in fiction. George Lucas created the special editions of the OT. The last time the theatrical versions were available for purchase was 2006, limited run. You had to buy the special editions to get them. Obtaining a decent condition copy of this release is becoming increasingly difficult. As far as we are aware, you can't stream them anywhere, legally. Let's compare this state of affairs with Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien movie, Alien. When the quadrilogy was conceptualized, Scott was asked to make a director's cut version of his movie. All the other Alien movies had DC variants. Scott was happy with Alien and didn't want to make any changes. Instead, he faffed about with various editing techniques. Why? The studio insisted on having a DC for each movie. The DC of Alien is famously confusing, because people aren't sure how or why it is edited differently. You can still buy both versions brand new. DCs aren't meant to replace the theatrical cut. In most cases, they are just brain-dead cash grabs. The special editions were not meant to be director's cuts. They were meant to be substitutions for the historical versions. But I'm no sleeper agent, and I'm not trying to shove anything down your throat. The Star Wars OT is part of our history. The prequels are part of our history. The EU is part of our history. The work of creators is as worthy of preservation as any other part of history, even if the creators doubt that themselves. Maintaining the Star Wars continuity is a highly worthy pursuit in its own right. Hundreds of people have made their best effort to write within the constraints of established canon. The burden of canon is on subsequent works, always. That is what you signed up for when you agreed to work within the universe. If a contradiction arises, the earlier conflicting point wins out. It must, for that is what a literary universe is. Fiction that builds upon, and is constrained by, other fiction. All feats of great distance begin with feats of great imagination. It's important to make sure that we take care of one of the greatest feats of imagination our world has ever known. Until the Disney empire crumbles to ash, the bread circus will be here, doing the bread circus things the bread circus way. That's it, the video is over. We hope you enjoyed it. You are still here? Why are you still here?
I'm afraid we'll be deviating a bit from standard analysis procedures today, Gordon.
Yes, but with good reason. This is a rare opportunity for us. This is the purest sample we've seen yet.
And, potentially, the most unstable.
You just spent the entire duration of Return of the Jedi watching this video about how broken Disney Wars 9 is.
Now, if you follow standard insertion procedures, everything will be fine.
I don't know how you can say that, although I will admit that the possibility of a resonance cascade scenario is extremely unlikely.
Gordon doesn't need to hear all this. He's a highly trained professional. We've assured the administrator that nothing will go wrong.
Yes, you're right. Gordon, we have complete confidence in you.
Well, go ahead. Let's let him in now.
Are you expecting some kind of post-credits Marvel thing to happen?
Testing. Everything seems to be in order.
Disney owns Marvel now. When did that happen?
All right, Gordon. Your suit should keep you comfortable through all this. The specimen will be delivered to you in a few moments.
In Aliens 4, Walmart buys Wayland Yutani.
If you would be so good as to climb up and start the rotors...
That was meant to be satire, not a blueprint.
We can bring the anti-mass spectrometer to 80% and hold it there until the carrier arrives. Gordon,
Are you not hearing me? Climb up and start the rotors, please. What are you doing in there?
Put here! Get away from the...
No! Attempting shutdown. It's not shutting down. It's not...
Oh no! Something horrible has been unleashed upon the world. Something truly awful and bad. Our Patreon supporters. Stay a while and listen.
I don't believe it. Get down on your knees now and scream it. Apologize for all your crimes. Look me in the eyes now and mean it. Scream it. I don't believe it. On your hands and knees till you're bleeding. Apologize for all your ties. Look me in the eyes now and mean it. You're bleeding. I don't believe it. Get down on your knees now and please it. I fixed on the screen, you'll see what we need. You're not to complete, repeat after me. I fixed on the screen, you'll see what we see. You're not to believe, repeat after me.
Das LOL Tractor uses a TF2 avatar, Conk, a Discord moderator, the last survivor of the 423rd Royal Battlemech Division, who tried out 422 times before they accepted him, and Zafrex, whose name sounds like a pill you would take to calm down while scrolling your Twitter timeline. Nice guy, honestly.
I made this for you, so you'd remember me.
It's beautiful. But I don't need to remember you.
What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? I'm a Toydarian. Mind tricks don't work on me. Only money. No money, no parts, no deal.